Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, good. Everybody's really ready today. I will now convene the November 29, 2018 meeting of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Kathleen Allevy, Kirsten Barnes, Catherine Williams-Brown, C. Michael Cooney, Linda Darling-Hammond,
Here.
Marisol Escobedo, Jose Gonzalez, Makita Guino-Shire, Johanna Howard, Alicia Hine, Bonnie Clark, Kevin Quinn, Jim Marks, Monica Martinez, Castle Redmond, Ade Rodriguez, Tina Sloan, Andrew Wall, Stephanie Papas. We have a quorum.
All right. And Commissioner Barnes, will you please call the roll? We have two new individuals at the commission table. Andrew Wall, who is the new ex officio representative of the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities, and Aya Shupp, who is the new Educator Preparation Student Liaison. I'll introduce them in turn. Dr. Wall is the Robert A. and Mildred Peronia Naslund Endowed Dean of the School of Education at the University of Redlands. Wall joined Redlands in July 2014 from the University of Rochester in New York, trading in snow for much better weather, where he was Associate Professor and Department Chair of Educational Leadership at the Margaret Warner Graduate School of Education. While at Rochester, Wall also served as the Higher Education Program Director, and most recently as the Interim Co-Director for the Warner Center of Professional Development and Education Reform. Alongside his leadership achievements, Wall's teaching has won him numerous accolades, the highest accolades of all, including the Award for Excellence in Teaching by a non-tenured member of the faculty in 2010, and being named a 2008 Emerging Scholar by the American College Personnel Association. His research and scholarship interests span the educational spectrum and have included examining P-12 school finance, teacher preparation, student health and learning, along with assessment and evaluation in education. Dr. Wall received his PhD in Education, Organization, and Leadership from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He also holds a BA in Sociology and Political Science from the University of Iowa and an MA in Academic and Student Affairs from Ball State University. Thank you, and we're delighted to have you here. And then Aya Shupp is joining us. She is currently a student in the Education Specialist Program at the University of California, Riverside. Very important for us to be getting more education specialists into the field. We're delighted that you're with us to advise us in that regard. Her experience with applied behavior analysis has been extensive. She was a behavior interventionist for 2.5 years and volunteered in clinical and hospital settings where she worked with children with special needs. Aya now works in a research lab with Dr. Michael Solis, where they are working on reading intervention strategies for children with autism. She is also working on an independent synthesis paper on the features of prosody intervention strategies, as well as preparing to apply to the special education doctoral program at the University of California, Riverside. This is one busy lady. We are very pleased to welcome both of you to the Commission, and we look forward to working with you on the challenging and important work of this agency. Welcome. The next item, item 2A, is the approval of the September 2018 minutes. We will need to make two separate motions to approve the Executive Committee and regular session minutes. I would like to remind everyone that only those who served on each committee can make and second the motion to approve the committee minutes. So do I have a motion from a member of the Executive Committee, and these are the chairs of the other committees who are on the Executive Committee, to approve the September 2018 Executive Committee minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Klatt. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Next, do I have a motion to approve the September 2018 Commission minutes? Commissioner Rodriguez. And do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. Any discussion? Yes.
Madam Chair, I think it's momentous that I found 3 typos in this segment, and I'll take great pleasure in sharing those with Haiju after the meeting. But otherwise, I would support the motion.
Well, and for those who have that itch, that editorial itch, which you obviously have, and don't find typos month after month, it can be frustrating. I understand.
This has been.
So it is very, very rare, and thank you for pointing that out. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Folks who weren't here? Okay. Motion carries. The next item is 2B, approval of the November 2018 agenda. We have agenda inserts for items 1A, 2H, and 3B, which you will have, for those who are new, they're in the pink leaflets. Do I have a motion to approve the November 2018 agenda? Commissioner Barnes, thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Marks. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Agenda item 2C is the approval of the November 2018 consent calendar. Do commissioners have any items they would like to consider in closed session? Commissioner Barnes?
Number 5, Henry Armenta.
Okay. Any others? Wow, that's good. You might get it might be a shorter session this time. Do I have a motion to approve all the remaining items on the consent calendar? All right, thank you very much. It's great to see you here. And do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kung. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. I just want to sort of launch us off by acknowledging, recognizing, and taking a moment to send our warm prayers and thoughts for all of the people who've been affected by the fires over the last month. I mean, many people have been affected, but some whole communities have been wiped out. We got a note from our Commissioner Marisol de la Torre Escobedo, who is up in Chico. She's not here at this meeting because it is all hands on deck. I think she said in her note that 79 of the 90 families in their senior class were homeless. Of course, we, want to think about all of the families, all of the parents, all of the children who are affected, and also just acknowledge how much work the educators are doing. She said, everybody's been hands on deck to take care of housing needs, food needs, trying to rebuild the buildings, trying to figure out how to begin to re-engage with education and so on. So I know we're all thinking about our friends, our colleagues, our families, and just praying for a quick recovery and thanking all of the people who are involved in making that happen. So yes, Catherine.
If I may add to that list, and all their teachers, because, for instance,
yes.
at Butte Community College, every teacher in the Child Development Center lost their home.
Yeah. So
they're teachers too.
Yeah. So many people just making it day to day. It's been really heartwarming to see, how people have been coming together to really address the great sense of loss that they have, and proud to be a part of such a caring community. So we'll miss Marisol and others who are engaged in that this time, but I hope by our next meeting we'll see homes being rebuilt and schools opening and people restarting their lives. At this point, I'm going to turn to Mary for the Executive Director's report.
Good morning, Commissioners, members of our larger community. It's great to see you, our last meeting of the year. I have a couple of introductions I'd like to make. First and foremost, I'd like to invite Cara Mendoza. Will you stand just so everyone can see you? Cara Mendoza, Dr. Mendoza, began her career. She's just joined our staff. I'm sorry. She's here as a staff consultant. She'll be, right. She will be working. We do. So be forewarned, it could be you next time. No, Dr. Mendoza she's just joined our staff. She'll be working in our grants program, so she hit the ground running. We've got RFPs out for our residency grant opportunities, our local solutions grants, and Cara is going to join the grants team and has joined the grants team, and she's you don't have to stand through the whole thing, but thank you. So she began her career in 1986 teaching for the Grant Joint Union High School District, now the Twin Rivers Unified, middle and high school English at Rio Tierra Junior and Grant Union High Schools. Early on, she discovered the Area 3 Writing Project at UC Davis, a professional learning community that sustained her throughout her career. Cara was the co-director of the California Writing Project at UC Berkeley for 3 years before moving to New Mexico, where she served as the co-director for curriculum and instruction for the Santa Fe Public Schools. Eventually, California called her and her husband home, and for the past 13 years, Cara has been a central office and site administrator for the Fairfield-Sassoon Unified School District, where she directed the district's induction program for many years and also successfully led a Title I elementary school site. Cara comes to the CTC, as she says, with a breadth of knowledge of TK through 16 education and is, as she says, elated to join the outstanding professional services division staff. So welcome, Cara. In fact, she's got a very fast induction as she's got an item presenting today. The second staff announcement that I'd like to make pertains to Dr. Catherine Carney, who's sitting behind us over here on the wall, who will be retiring before our next meeting on February 1st. I know. Yeah, good for her, and the rest of us are trying to figure out how to get along. But let me just do a quick recap of some of our adventures together. Dr. Carney joined the commission as, I know, I won't go all the way back to 1422, I promise. Those stories stay there, right? But she joined the commission as a consultant in 2013 and worked on intern issues. She ran a successful intern program for many years, and developing the requirements that were put into regulations, ensuring that all interns receive at least 144 hours of support and supervision, and the additional 45 hours of support related to teaching English learners. Prior to joining the commission, she directed the San Joaquin Impact Intern Preparation Program and led the county office into its WASC Senior Accreditation, the first county office to be accredited as a graduate school of education. In October of 2014, Catherine became an administrator in the Professional Services Division, helping to shepherd the strengthening and streamlining the accreditation system project initially, and then she became responsible for the operational implementation of the revised system, which has been a significant undertaking. We changed everything, and Catherine has been in the control box there, helping to really make sure this is engineered for implementation effectively. So she's worked tirelessly to identify program review and common standards readers, thereby setting up all of the site visit teams, ensured that volunteers are reimbursed for their expenses while volunteering for the commission, that professional services division is operationally sound. She helped foster a positive work environment in PSD by instituting Super Tuesdays. Cross-divisional salad throwdowns, payday treats, and her animal-focused countdown to retirement. We are going to miss Catherine, and we are so grateful for the many ways that you have helped get our work into action. So thank you for your service. So the final thing I would like to report to you is that today is a significant day in our assessment development work. We have had 681 candidates submit their assessments for the California Teaching Performance Assessment, and today is the day they will receive their first reports. This has been also part of the significant work we've been undertaking for the last several years, and it's a moment when all of the development meets the road, and we have candidates who've been assessed and have received their reports, and that system is now operational. And thank you, Amy Rising, for all of the tireless work that you've put into doing that. We also, for the California Administrator Performance Assessment, have just over 1,000 candidates registered for that assessment this year. 147 submissions are in, and we will begin training, I think, next week, the assessors to start scoring those assessments. So it's a big moment in a lot of effort to get to this moment. So that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Very good. Do any commissioners have items to report? Yes, Commissioner Rodriguez.
All right. Good morning. This is actually a report or a note that Commissioner Escobedo has asked me to read on her behalf. Hello, everyone. We're experiencing the aftermath of an unprecedented event, the Camp Fire, which I'm sure you've seen on national news. I want to share with you that what I'm witnessing on the front lines. November 8th was awful, but our community, first responders and educators and admin, rose so high in this time of crisis. From the Paradise Unified teachers squeezing kids in their personal vehicles to make a quick escape, to Ponderosa Elementary school bus driver Kevin McKay driving through the burning embers to get kids to safety. There's so many stories, and unfortunately so many casualties too. I attended, Commissioner Escobedo, a trauma training yesterday and was in awe of the number of educators who lost their homes. Yet they are gearing up and getting ready to resume classes on December 3rd. One of the biggest challenges for Paradise Unified has been the question, where do we house our students? The school's classrooms are gone. Every school in the county is contributing in one way or another, and action plans are in place. I want to express a deep appreciation to our Butte County Office of Education Superintendent Tim Taylor and the BCOE staff, our administrators countywide, and our teachers, counselors, school psychologists, and all staff who have gone above and beyond to display their professional commitment to our students by reminding them that they care and they're here to support their success. Thank you to Governor Brown and Governor-elect Gavin Newsom. Tom Torlakson, the state response has been invaluable. And a big thank you to the districts statewide who have lent a big helping hand. We've learned the big lessons on how to rebuild from Sonoma County and so many more. The National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement at USC has provided trainings and resources, and they will be with us in the coming weeks to support as well. Our high school age kids have risen to the occasion. I want to share the vision of 30 very driven students who want the arts to thrive and heal our community. With the help of Superintendent Tim Taylor, they have created #ArtStrongButte County to creatively rebuild our community following the devastating Camp Fire. The goal is to be innovative and collaborative in integrating the arts from pre-K through 12 within all Butte County schools and support educational arts organizations in our community. They asked me to share their goal with you. They want to reach 1 million people who support the rebuilding of Butte County and the arts with a $10 donation or 10 million. And whichever comes first before June 1st, 2019. If anyone knows Oprah or Ellen DeGeneres or anyone else, please spread the word. The website is www.artstrongbutecounty.org, and all funds raised will be linked to the North Valley Community Foundation, an organization supporting relief efforts countywide. Thank you all. Butte County Strong, Art Strong Butte County.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate hearing directly. Yeah, thank you. Any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Barnes.
Kind of along those lines, the CAS, the California Association of School Counselors, got a plea for help from the Butte County Office of Education to ask for any and all to reach out to any counselors, mental health, social workers, anybody that could be available coming when to help the students and families. And so CAS put out an all call, and so far they have like 50 names which they've given to the Butte County Office of Education who are willing to either, and some have talked with their own districts to either have some time to go be there in December, be there now, and so that's an ongoing kind of collaboration. And so if anybody, they're still looking for people, so if you know anybody with some mental health, social worker, psychologist, anybody, the Butte County Office of Education is looking for support, and they're the ones organizing it. So Cass gave them the names of the people who have volunteered, or people are willing to go on the weekends, the nights, whatever's needed. So if you know anybody up in that area, just get a hold of the Butte County Office of Education.
Thank you. Any other reports from any other commissioners? Before we leave this part of the session, then I'm going to take the opportunity to report on the evaluation of our executive director, which thank you all for being part of that process. Each year, the commission evaluates the executive director. Members are surveyed based on the executive director's action plan and an evaluation form that allows a rating for each step on the plan. Additionally, the commission provides an overall rating, which assesses the degree to which the director supports the commission, provides leadership in implementing commission goals and objectives. The process provides the opportunity for each commission member to submit his or her own ratings along with narrative commentary about the performance of the executive director. The chair and the vice chair tabulate the results, discuss the evaluation with the executive director. Overall, the performance evaluation yielded a favorable assessment of Dr. Sandy's leadership. You are aware that it's a 5-point scale. There were some 5.0s and a whole bunch of very high 4-point somethings on the various ratings. Very strong consensus that the performance is positive, reflective of a job well done. I always like to look at the various comments that come in. One thing that always strikes me is that there are a lot of comments about how well the staff performs. So I want to, this always becomes an occasion for acknowledging the staff as well, because this place really works well as a team. So among the comments that we had was that the meeting materials are thorough and timely provided. The professionals who represent the items are extremely well versed in their areas. I've been impressed with the quality of their presentations. Edie Sandy, along with her leadership team, set high expectations for the content and form of the item materials and presentations. So we'll take that as an acknowledgement both of the executive director and of all the staff who do such a fabulous job. And really represent the commission well. There's a place on the evaluation where we're asked to give 3 or more major strengths of the executive director, and a set of adjectives comes forward. So we have descriptions like committed to the mission of the CTC, thoughtful and analytic, cares deeply about educator preparation, gracious, respectful, coalition builder, excellent communicator, politically savvy, highly regarded by colleagues and other stakeholders not only in California but across the nation, a person who has a continuous improvement mindset and always pushes positively toward the highest of standards. And we could go on, but we just want to acknowledge our appreciation for a job well done and our high regard and confidence in your knowledge, skill, and ability. So please join me in thanking and congratulating Director Sandy on a job well done, and we'll look forward to her leadership in the coming year. And we'll move on to liaisons. Do any liaisons have items to report? Yes.
This is more of a report going forward than a report going backwards, but the California Community College ECE Faculty and Staff Association Executive Board is meeting tomorrow and was thrilled to see that there's an update on the child development permit for today, so I'll have something to take to them tomorrow. And also really excited that by the February meeting there'll be more to come. So a special thanks to Erin. Thank you, Erin. It's been really great working with Erin and all the staff, but the Tri-CEC board is really excited. Thank you.
Any other liaison reports? All right. Moving right along, I now recess the general session and move to the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Kung will chair the committee in Commissioner Gonzalez's absence. Will you please convene the committee? Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call the November 2018 meeting of the Education Preparation Committee to order. We have 6 agenda items, one of which has an insert. 5 of the items are scheduled for today, and 1 more tomorrow in the morning. For all speakers, we have a 3-minute time limit. When you hear the alert, please come to a close. The first item today is the annual report on the Committee on Accreditation. The item is being presented by Cheryl Forbes, Cheryl Hickey, and Catherine Kearney. This is an information item. Ms. Hickey, will you begin?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. So I wanted to take a moment to introduce Dr. Cheryl Forbes, who is a member of our Committee on Accreditation. Unfortunately, Dr. Anna Moore was supposed to be here today for this, and she hurt her back yesterday. She's one of our co-chairs, and so she was told by her doctor that she could not drive here. And then Dr. Bob Frelly, who is at Chapman University, is representing Chapman in a music education conference back east, so could not also be here. But we're very thankful for Dr. Cheryl Forbes, University of California, San Diego, for being with us today to represent the members of the Committee on Accreditation. So this is the 2017-18 report of the Committee on Accreditation to the Commission. It is required by Education Code that the committee provide you with this every year, and so it's traditional now for us to do this in the November-December meeting. And before we dive into the report, I want to thank Ida Rodriguez, our commissioner here, who serves as the commission liaison to the Committee on Accreditation, and it is really valuable to have her perspective and to make that connection between the committee and the commission at each meeting. So it's very valuable. So I wanted to make sure we thank you for your time and for coming to each of the meetings. I wanted to provide some context where we are with the strengthening and streamlining effort before we jump into the actual report. Especially because we have some new commissioners. So I wanted to just remind you all that in 2014 through 16, we really undertook a gigantic effort to really take a comprehensive look at our accreditation system. Everything from the standards to, new performance assessments to the processes and procedures we use in accreditation, and really to try to focus on some outcomes to the best we can, given the information that we are able to have at this point in time. And we really engaged many stakeholders in that effort. We had, I think, 60 or 70 individuals that were a regular part of our review system. And in 16-17, we took a year to really do extensive technical assistance with the field. So we really focused on that effort to allow the field to get a chance to really understand the new standards, to understand the new processes and procedures, and for the commission staff to really refine some of those procedures along with the COA. And then, so this report in 17-18 now reflects that first year of actual implementation. We had deferred site visits for a year in 16-17, and in 17-18 restarted those site visits. So this was of the green cohort. So each institution belongs to one of 7 cohorts, in which they do one of the years of accreditation activities, and those activities are on page page 8 of the report for the new commissioners. We do have a 7-year cycle of activities, and there are things that are due every year. So it is not us looking at an institution once every 7 years, but rather there is activities that the institution must be responsible for. In particular, our annual data system, which we'll talk a little bit more. So this report is a first sort of headway into the new system. The green cohort still had parts of the old system in place because they had already done the program assessment, which was part of the old system. This year, as we undertake site visits this year, all institutions are fully into the new system. So we'll be able to report on that next year. So just as a reminder, some of the major efforts in this strengthening and streamlining we've listed on page 10. because you can see how comprehensive that effort actually was. And we wanted to remind you of just how comprehensive things were. And then, Section 1, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on each aspect of the report, but I wanted to just cover the fact that it covers the general work that we all do. So the public meetings that the Committee on Accreditation has, they met over the course of the year. The fact that we did continue technical assistance throughout the year. We really spent a lot of time revamping our training, and our training for both the team leads and for our folks that are team members. So we redid the Board of Institutional Reviewer training, which now is a two-part training. The first part is that they are part of the program review activity, which Catherine Kearney will talk about a little bit later. And then they do a face-to-face on-site training for being an on-site reviewer. And so we really spent last year really honing in on what are those things that we need to focus in on the training. And we were able to get that off the ground in June of this past year. And the other thing that I wanted to mention here is the annual data system. We did spend a lot of time in previous years with the contractor getting the system built. Last year, we spent a lot of the time really working with the field, understanding what was expected of them in terms of how to create their, what we call program decks, what kind of pathways were we looking for, the kinds of data we're asking for in these first couple of years. We do plan to expand that, and that is a work in progress. We are now taking a look at that data that has come in. We're seeing where there are maybe some issues that we need to redefine or clarify our definitions, those kinds of things. And we do plan to have an agenda item for you on this early in 2019. So we'll bring an item that specifically focuses on the annual data system. The other thing that I wanted to mention on Section 1 is the survey work. As you all know from previous agenda items, we've spent a lot of time making sure that we actually get high response rates in surveys. And so last year was the first year we could actually use the survey results in accreditation decision making. And so what happened was in this first year, the teams had access to the survey data. They were able to formulate questions and really be able to dig deeper into maybe issues that seemed to be areas of concern or areas that they thought needed more probing. So they used that in those questions. We are now taking a look at that data from a statewide perspective, and again, we'll bring an item back to you early in 2019. I believe it will be at the next meeting on some of those statewide issues that we may be finding or things that we may be finding. We did work with the California Council on Teacher Education last year in their conference and sort of prefaced, here are some of the things we're finding. Of course, there are issues with, well, maybe if you worded it this way, we might get a different, different finding and those kinds of things. Or our candidates don't really understand that terminology. They understand this terminology. So that work continues. So those are two big efforts, and we will plan to have an agenda item that focuses on both of those items in early 2019. Section 2 is really the bulk of the Committee on Accreditation work when it comes to, and that starts on page 23, and that is the decision making of the Committee on Accreditation. So through 2018, the Committee on Accreditation made decisions on 29 institutions in the green cohort, and again, this is the first time they were in the new system. 22 or 76% received full accreditation, with 4 of these institutions requiring a seventh year report. And a seventh year report with accreditation means that there's just an update that the Committee on Accreditation wanted to make sure that something was still being implemented or there was but it wasn't a major concern. It was just something somewhat minor that they just felt like they needed that assurance a year later. 7 institutions received some level of stipulations. Of those, 4 received stipulations, which is the most minor of those. 1 received major and 2 received probationary. And then Section 2 also contains an analysis of the breakdown on the standard findings for all standards, just for your information to see if we can see any big trends. There was nothing that really jumped out really strongly this year. There's always issues with the use of data and continuous improvement, and that continues to be an issue. So the COA also continued to follow up with 3 institutions for which stipulations from previous site visits had not been entirely removed. And those are listed on page 28. It's important to note that institutions must respond to all stipulations within 1 year of the site visit. However, COA may extend that time if they feel like significant progress has been made to address the stipulations. And it's usually done when they feel like they need assurances of any change or improvement. In particularly, it happens sometimes when there's data that was not being collected, and then you see the full implementation of the data system, and that takes some time, of course, to see. So the 3 institutions listed on that page have now fully addressed all stipulations, with Holy Names receiving full accreditation at the last COA meeting. The report also lists the 5 programs the COA approved for those institutions that the Commission had provisionally approved under the new initial institutional approval process. They approved 20 new preparation programs with no real clear trends on, a certain aspect being, number 1. This section also lists the 8 new subject matter programs that were approved by the Commission, not by the Committee on Accreditation, but we felt like we needed it included there, with 7 ESM programs, elementary subject matter programs, and 1 single subject ag program. 18 programs went inactive. That means they're no longer accepting new candidates, but they're not ready to withdraw. And 35 programs withdrawn, with the highest frequency being the autism spectrum disordered added authorization. 5 institutions were closed as a result of the program sponsors withdrawing their last program, and there was significant work that was done to transition, particularly the induction programs, to the new standards. So we required a transition plan and reviewed those plans, and those are all listed on page 32 through 35. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Carney, who I will miss greatly, and probably more than anybody else. The amount of work that she has done to get this new system up and running, it just can't be understated. It's incredible. So, Catherine.
It's a pleasure to be here presenting one last time. Thank you so much. I do want to just note that it's appropriate that I'm leaving and Kara's coming in, because I'm just really an old middle school English teacher from New Mexico. So you're just replacing another middle school person. So the part of the strengthening and streamlining effort included some big changes to the activities that we do in the years leading up to the site visit. As you'll recall, we increased the frequency that preconditions were submitted. They used to be submitted right before the site visit, and now we have moved that to institutions submitting preconditions within the first year of the accreditation cycle and the 4th year of the accreditation cycle. In order to make this shift, we had to have 3 sets of preconditions come in the first year that we implemented this, and then it changed to 2. So to give you some idea, it really involves the whole staff. The good news is this work is mainly invisible to you all. That means there's not problems, right? It's not coming in front of you all the time. But in the 17-18, those cohorts, 98 sets of general preconditions and 387 sets of program preconditions were reviewed, which was a total of 2,584 individual preconditions. This year's, when we switch now to just 2 cohorts, because we're in the full cycle, slightly lower. It's always dependent on the institutions, how many programs they have. So staff reviewed a total of 2,155 preconditions. And that's the initial review. So there's a resubmission process, and it's very serious because these are compliance issues. Preconditions live in regulations. They live in commission policy. So the expectation is that there's an immediate response if there is an issue. And one of the things that we have discovered as we have launched this new system is that both the institutions and staff had a need for more prescriptive requirements regarding what is sufficient for evidence that preconditions are being met. So we have provided the field with very specific guidelines for general preconditions, induction preconditions, and administrative services preconditions, and we are in the process of developing that kind of guidance for all the preconditions. And the field has been really appreciative of that, and it has created better efficiencies internally as well. In year 5, quite a lot of actions happens for year 5. Program standards are the responses to those, which is called program review, comes in the fall, and that is really an opportunity for the institution to provide evidence of how they are addressing the standards for all of their programs. For the reviewers, it is like taking a step into their virtual evidence room a year prior to the visit. I think that this change may be one of the most significant decisions that you made. And the reason for that is twofold, really. The first is that institutions are provided with feedback from people who will potentially be on their visit. We draw a subset from the total set of reviewers, we draw a subset who then goes to the visit. So they're providing feedback to the institution, and really kind of two different things happen. One is that the institutions say, we do that. In fact, it was right there in the stuff. They missed it. In which case, they pull it up, they pull that link up to the top, and there it is. In other cases, and this is where I think it's so significant, is accreditation is about continuous improvement. That is the goal. And so when there is an issue that arises in year 5, and the institution gets the feedback a year in advance of their visit, and there is a legitimate problem, they have a chance to fix the problem before the site visit even occurs. So instead of correcting on the back end, we're informing on the front end and allowing institutions to work with a consultant and bring their program up to standards. I anticipate, well, I guess I won't be here to see the results, but I'll follow them, that we will see in the next year or so many more METs for program standards than we have in the past when we didn't give this kind of guidance and information. The other half of that is that because these are operational programs, they are not telling us what they're doing, they're showing us what they're doing because it's operational. And so they are doing much more internal self-evaluation in the process of getting ready. So for the yellow cohort, the first cohort that had that went through program review, and the information for this is on pages 38 and 39. 137 programs were reviewed for 36 institutions. This involved about 270 reviewers who came together in pairs, and of whom a subset of them are actually on visits right now. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited at the prospect of that. We work forward, and so right now, in fact, yesterday, in our new Capitol room, great space, we are already doing program review for the orange cohort who has site visits next year. And there's 33 institutions with 126 programs. So about 250 reviewers are involved in that. And as Cheryl mentioned, that also is the first part of BIR training for them. So we're growing our Board of Institutional Reviewers, and our institutions are also gaining the insight of experts. The reviewers are matched based on their expertise their availability for the review, and their future availability for a site visit the year next. So it's a combination of Match.com and Jenga. I just pray that not too many rods fall out. By December the 7th, all but about 11 programs of the 126 will have been reviewed, and we will be in the process of returning feedback to the institutions as soon as that last program in the first couple of weeks of January is reviewed. Fall visits got priority, so those are reviewed in advance of that. Common standards come in the spring for those same institutions in year 5, and the yellow cohort, again, first cohort that had both halves, the program review and the common standards reviewed. And what happens there for those 36 institutions in the yellow cohort were that teams of 2 or 3, it depends on the size of the institution. So it's either 2 common standards reviewers and 1 team lead, or 1 common standards reviewer and 1 team lead. Come together, and they already know that they will be on the visit. So they are really starting the investigation for the visit during the spring. They come together. They also provide feedback in the same way, and this is a very big departure from how it was in the past. In the past, the common standards were reviewed about 60 days before the site visit, and the institution did not have very much time to make corrections. So again, I think that this is going to result in many more common standards being met. I'm saying that because a year from now, I don't want you to think we've gotten soft and we're just, everybody gets a pass. I think that there's going to be real improvement in terms of people engaging in continuous improvement earlier. And it also allows the staff to identify any big issues a year out and do some more focused intervention. So I think with that, I'll say my final goodbye and pass this to Dr. Forbes.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and also to serve on the Committee on Accreditation. So I'm going to be talking about some of the current work or the things that we'll be doing this year, which start on page 40. But before that, I'd just like to highlight a couple of the trends that we're starting to see now with this new data that we've been collecting that's been described this morning. And so one of the, I think, items that's become very clear to all of us on the COA is that we're still in the midst of some pretty profound systemic change with all of these new program standards, new TPEs, and also the new accreditations, which is both streamlined and strengthened. So one of the trends that we've seen has been within the teacher induction programs. So there's been a lot of progress on this front. It's a pretty substantive change to move from the previous sort of cycles of learning to the very individualized way now that you've constructed induction and what happens there. So some of the programs that we've seen that have been especially exciting right now have been Santa Ana Unified, San Mateo Foster City, San Bernardino City Unified School District, and Fairfield-Suisun Unified School District are just a few of the programs that really have transformed and in which we're hearing some pretty exciting stories about how powerful this individualized approach really can be. However, we're still seeing some programs that are grappling with this change because it is such a profound change. And so particularly maybe where they had a infrastructure already in place over time, they're still making that transition to this individualized system. And so the new accreditation processes that have been described by Ms. Hickey and Ms. Carney have helped us as a COA to provide guidance, I think, early on along the way, and also then when some of these institutions have come forward with site visits. We've also seen some similar positive results with the preliminary teaching and administrative programs embracing all aspects of the new standards. And so it really does seem to us, from the COA perspective, that all of this extensive technical assistance that was described earlier has been very valuable for the field because they're getting it. Another item that we're going to be working on is establishing a process to identify exemplary practices with now all of this data that we've been collecting. that the system is collecting. So we understand that the Commission is interested in finding a way to identify programs with these exemplary practices. I mentioned a few that we felt were strong from the induction world. So the COA discussed this over the past year, and we've identified a process that we'll be piloting very soon. And we still are discussing those details, but we plan for it to go operational in 2019. So I believe there will be future items coming forward to you on that regard. Another item that I'd like to highlight in general before we sort of enumerate what we're going to be doing over this next very busy year is I think that the whole system has allowed the COA to use much closer oversight for those institutions that do come forward in their site visits with stipulations. And so we're routinely now using quarterly reports, status reports, to render stipulations, but also to provide guidance to the field, to those institutions, I should say. So, in other words, the institutions really can't wait to address the issues that have arisen during the accreditation process and the site visit. And it ensures that those actions that are being taken are really consistent with the standards. They're not off on their own, kind of implementing something. So I think the whole system really speaks to me as an educator to the power of formative assessment along the way. We're giving a lot of feedback to institutions at various points in time, starting with the increased frequency of the preconditions to the submission of the program review and common standards the year before the site visit, and then again after the site visit for those institutions who still haven't fully implemented this new process of using the reports. I think has allowed us to provide a lot more guidance through that process as well. So in the year ahead, we'll continue to move forward with the full implementation of the new system. We're going to review the findings for 36 site visits in the yellow cohort this year. We're going to be monitoring the program review and common standards review process for the orange cohort, as Dr. Carney mentioned, 36 institutions, and their site visits begin in fall of 2019. The staff, of course, is working on the preconditions and the submissions that are coming in for the red and blue cohorts. And one thing that I've noticed as a COA member is that those are red flags when there's issues with the preconditions. And this system now is allowing us to attend to those quite a bit sooner, I think. I think we'll probably see that, as Dr. Carney mentioned, that's not going to be a bad thing if there are fewer of them. It probably means that we're getting to them sooner, right? We're going to be working to continue to help with the annual data system collection and make sure it's clean data, that everybody knows, understands the same kind of terms that's been described earlier, that the guidance to the field is clear and consistent across programs, and to continue to look at how can we make this data useful in accreditation now that we can include the TPA data and other outcomes data. We'll be working to continue how to best incorporate survey data. So we'll be looking at ways in which the accreditation teams are using this within the accreditation site visit, but also looking at the outliers now across the state level, as I believe both Ms. Hickey and Dr. Carney mentioned. So then we'll also be monitoring the new BIR training. It seems to be working very well, but we're curious to learn more about that. And the processes that I mentioned before for identifying exemplary practices. And last item, but not least, is that many of our institutions participate in both national and state accreditation. So we'll be continuing to look at how to help support institutions going through that process, since there will be a joint CAPE and CTC site visit in the spring of 2019. So I think those are some of the items that I wanted to highlight, and we're happy to address any questions that you might have.
Thank you. We will now open for public comment. And okay, seeing none, the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Yes. Chair Darling-Hammond.
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone who's spoken for the enormous amount of work that goes into the accreditation process. Thank you so much for leading us in that process, and to the staff for all of the work to redesign it and to really create a new approach. So it's exciting to hear all of this, and I'm excited for the next session as well, early in 2019. I wanted to just follow up a little bit as you were talking about the flags that are coming up and being able to sort of see what might need attention before you even get there and so on. What are some of the, I would love just get a sense, maybe with some examples of how any of the new data are, kind of providing those flags, the surveys or the other quantitative data, et cetera, that you have access to.
So I can talk a little bit about what has happened in program review that has, I think, really helped the field, is that we identified pretty early on which programs have not embraced the new standards. So the standards that were adopted for induction rely on a relationship with the mentor and with it being driven by an individual. And we see in the program review, because they're showing us actual evidence, not telling us about it, that maybe they aren't individualizing, that we have found programs that are very lockstep, and we've been able then to provide technical assistance sooner rather than later, and that might not have been discovered until the site visit. That's one example.
Mm-hmm. To the surveys, I think we've done a really good job of getting the teams to use the surveys one-on-one in site visits, but that's only 1/7 of the institutions every year. And so our next step is to really be able to use it and look at it statewide to say, there may be an issue here, and they're not being reviewed for another couple of years. So maybe we need to do some investigation earlier. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing now, trying to figure out how, what's the appropriate process for that to take place. Because certainly we can look at the data and you can say, there's an institution and they're scoring below the statewide average on 4 or 5 of the issues, and maybe we need to do something to jump in at that point in time outside of a regular accreditation site visit. So that's what we're doing right now to try to figure out that process.
Did you want to add anything about what, you're paying attention to? And
well, I think sometimes it can be almost as simple as who has late documents. And especially when it comes to preconditions, and what does that suggest about what's happening at the institution that we need to know about and work with them. So for example, institutions who've had many changes at top levels of administration, sometimes that shows up as maybe things aren't coming in, and so what can we do to intervene or to support? So because we're still seeing a lot right now, a lot of the institutions that we've been looking at haven't been all the way through the process, right? So they're kind of still transitioning. And so some of the things that I think we're seeing in terms of issues that probably now would be addressed in the program review, we're still seeing those in some of the site visit reports. But because then if there are stipulations, first of all, I think it's very clear sometimes when we might need to revise the team decision or on the stipulations for the overall, or help provide input into what the stipulations are after the site visits. Sometimes those reflect things that I think now will be surfaced a lot sooner in program review in terms of, I'm thinking of the induction programs in particular. So that's kind of my sense,
I guess, it's exciting to know that we're getting more sources of data. I spent yesterday with a group of folks who were HR leaders in the area here, and in the field, what you hear, both from sometimes folks in the districts and sometimes just through the teacher ed, pipelines, is this candidates from this program are usually very well prepared, but sometimes it's a specific program within a university, or sometimes it's, a specific institution where you get the feedback that, candidates don't feel prepared. They're not coming in with the right things. There was the conversation about, how do we give feedback to the university so that they know where their candidates are falling short and so on. So we're really aiming for this process of accreditation to be much less around the paperwork and much more around if there are programs in the state that are not doing the job, how do we really ensure that they improve or go away? One or the other, so that every teacher gets the benefit of a really strong program.
Well, and one thing I would say in reflection also as an institution, right, receiving these surveys and reports is that the surveys have been quite useful to us, I'd say across our system, but also at the campus level, now that the return rates are good enough that we can really use this data with some confidence. And so we've definitely been using those to guide a lot of different kinds of efforts across our institutions and also within our campus across programs.
Yeah. One of the nice things to see is when we dip in and get a little peek, most people feel relatively well prepared, and most employers feel that most people are relatively, but there is this little chunk of 10 or 15% of folks who do not feel like they're getting well prepared, and they're not spread randomly across institutions. So that's the thing we want to be able to really address.
And I think looking also at what are the programs, are there particular programs where maybe there's an issue with the standards, or maybe there's actually an issue with the preparation at the institution level, depending on what we see across the state level. But having the multiple perspectives from master teachers has also been very helpful in that effort. So even if the candidates may feel very well prepared, does that mean that they really know they are, or that they just feel that way? What do the master teachers have to say, and how do those two things compare?
Just one more thought on that. We've been talking a little bit with the staff about when folks come back for the clear credential, the 2 years out, whether to add a couple of items about how well they now think they were prepared having gotten 2 years of experience. Most of that survey focuses on induction, but it is a good moment as well to say, now that I've been out here, did I know what I needed to know, or what else would I have liked to have?
Or even of the different pathways within credentialing. So, how do interns feel versus how do traditionally prepared student teachers feel, things like that, I think.
Thank you. Appreciate all the wonderful work going into it.
Could I comment? So sitting in a program that experiences this, it feels different than it did 4 or 5 years ago. And so it does feel like formative feedback. But that actually is quite a change for people to regularly receive feedback and have me send out that we have to do something. I'm going to give that example. I'm curious how others are reacting. So what's the reaction in the field to formative feedback because of the change?
So that is a fantastic question. So the first year so in the past, just to bring everyone up very quickly, in the past what happened is this very long narrative, thousands of pages would come in, reviewers would read it, it would go back, and then the institution would write some more, and it would come back, and then it would be a back and forth. A lot of narrative, a lot of telling, not always very much showing. But in the end, prior to the site visit, all the standards would be preliminarily aligned because of this 2-year back and forth. Now, the feedback goes back after one review, and then the institution provides an addendum 60 days before the site visit. So the reviewers aren't telling them how they can get better. They're saying, here's the issues. Staff provides help in severe cases. So the first time last year, we heard back from people who were very upset because, and this is a quote, I'm used to getting A+. So an A+ in their view was no feedback. Right? So, but they were getting feedback because in the training, what we're telling the reviewers is, if you're even on the fence, give them feedback. Disclose what's concerning you so that they can do better. You're giving them a cookbook for being successful. So what we had to work with the institutions on is, you can get an A+ in the formative part. We can give you an A+. We can send you no feedback. But when the stakes are high at the site visit, you might fail that one. So where do you really want to get your A+? And so it was I guess I shouldn't have had it be unexpected, but it was unexpected, the level of pushback from, especially, I think, smaller programs that were like one person was really in charge. It was personal to them. And so that caused more anxiety. And so we really had to work with institutions to understand. And the more we've trained reviewers who also will be submitting, the more they get the feedback. I had a reviewer here yesterday who participated for the first time. And she said, oh, I'm going to feel so much better when I get my feedback. So now it's like when I get my feedback instead of when I get my test score.
Okay, we have Commissioner Sloan and Rodriguez.
Along those same lines, this was also my interest in this very extensive report. And by the way, Dr. Kearney, you look way too young to be retiring. I don't think it's really time. Do you think?
If you could follow me around for a while, that would be great. I am not young, and I started working my first years on a work permit when I was 14. So I have been doing this for a very, very many decades.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. We'll give you some rest and enjoyment now. My questions, I know I sometimes sound like a one-trick pony, but I have tremendous respect for the work that the COA and the Commission has done around this accreditation work, and particularly by putting in this emphasis on program improvement and continuous improvement. And Cheryl, you mentioned this continues to be one of the areas that we're still learning from, and so are institutions. And sometimes the data that we collect to ensure that programs are accountable and in a publicly visible way may not be the best data for programs to use in their continuous improvement. Sometimes it is. I mean, the surveys, as Cheryl had mentioned, we look at the surveys, we get an indication of where something might be problematic, but then we need to dig deeper. Now, our system has allowed for that because it has allowed institutions to determine what outcome measures they're using within their own programs, too, in combination with our standardized ones. At the same time, they are required to show how they're using that for improvement. And what I especially appreciate about our process is that we have allowed for institutions to come back and inform us about how they're doing that and what is working. And so I have one comment on that and one question. One comment is, I think it's critically important for us as a state to get really good at this as part of our accreditation system. The Commission has moved so much over the years in helping improve the field, not just ensure that it's accountable. So we have talked about, so one thing I wonder about, what sort of venues can we develop where institutions can both share with us what they have done and what has worked, but also share with each other in a collaborative problem-solving sort of way what they have been doing so that we all learn and get better as a field.
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think part of our effort and discussions around the exemplary practices effort has been just that. And it went from sort of kind of a blue ribbon, recognition to, no, what it really should be about is those institutions helping other institutions understand what it is that's working about their program and what practices that they're able to, they figured something out really well, or they do something exceptionally well, and to disseminate that information in some respect. So that's where that conversation has gone. But I think we are getting more and more requests for bringing the field together more, to share things. I don't have anything specific right now to say what the plans may be in that respects, but I think we can, continue to talk about where can we do that and what venues are appropriate for that to happen.
I think, I think also, so next week, the Induction Communities gatherings. Lost my mic. I think also we have to figure out how to create safe space for programs to discuss their flaws, not just the good programs sharing, but also programs feeling safe in discussing that. And I think that organizations like Cal Council and others who can bring people together in ways that maybe aren't led by the Commission so that there's not a sense of oversight. There's more a sense of let's study this together. I think that creating those safe spaces for the flaws to come out will help create change. I mean, that's what doctors do when a patient dies. They get together and talk about it.
I guess I would also frame it as a collaborative problem-solving opportunity rather than show your faults and we'll help you fix it.
Much better.
And again, I'm just thinking about the early days when we were implementing performance assessments for the first time. And groups got together. And the reason why those conferences that we would hold with PACT or any of those things were so successful is that we had a common language that we could speak and understand, and we had rubrics that describe different levels of sophistication of knowledge that everybody was using to look at evidence. And I think this is a similar thing. We all understand the same standards. We have different sorts of evidence, and we're trying to figure out what is the evidence that's going to be best and how do we use it best. But if, for whatever it's worth, I'd be willing to help in whatever we can do.
Okay. Commissioner Rodriguez, followed by Redmond.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all of your service and the amazing tone that you established at the Committee on Accreditation, and also to thank the committee under the direction of Cheryl Hickey and Terry Clark, because the work that has happened, the commitment that you've exemplified as committee members has been outstanding. And, you know, the transition, like in the last 2 years here at the commission, well, you know, some of the things that we've requested or that we've asked the Committee on Accreditation to do has been done in a very conscientious fashion and with a lot of thought, incisive questions, and that whole a term that was coined here, having the teeth. You know, getting the teeth out there to the accreditation, to the programs to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. And one of my observations is that the transition, part of it, you know, and we've talked about this at the committee, there's a warm and fuzzy component, like people get all excited because, you know, we were there and gave them feedback on how to improve. And everybody thanking, oh, thank you, even if they got, you know, marks that they weren't happy with. But, and trying to find that middle ground between when does this institution need to stop providing these services, and finding that, and the questions that have been asked, and I can tell you, commissioners, with confidence that they have worked so hard asking the right questions, from things like reading the surveys and asking, are these students, you know, going through the halo effect, and they're so happy because they finished, that they're giving such great feedback, right? And just very critical questions that have been asked in order for us to complete the charge that has been given by the CTC, right, of making sure that when the teachers are leaving an accreditation program, they're leaving prepared and they're leaving with the ability to work with students. And so I think this last year, that transition has opened up a lot of questions, and the committee members ask fantastic, incisive questions of the programs that come in, and I always feel like as we move forward and continue with, you know, the program that is the instrument that has been revamped, that the Committee on Accreditation just keeps getting better and better in finding that. So I want to thank you, and I think that we're on the right track. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Redmond, followed by Grinnell Shire.
Thank you for this report. Question, and kind of piggybacks on Chair Darling Hammond's comments about potentially being able to look 2 years back and how prepared were teachers. And it started me thinking about, I worked in urban school districts, and I know that it's different in urban, suburban, rural. It's very different. I'm wondering how, if we're able to disaggregate across some of those findings, kind of what are we learning about how prepared teachers feel in urban districts and versus rural, suburban, and in different and in other ways, and to figure out where to hone in on maybe across across programs rather than the individual program overall may not be doing, but maybe especially with new standards, revised standards, how successful are we? Because one thing we know that urban districts struggle, and new teachers in urban districts struggle, and being able to hone in on what the credentialing programs can do. I wonder if there's something within this within this work that can help us hone in on what those things are that the credentialing programs and the other programs can support.
I think as we look at the surveys going forward, we certainly could take that into consideration and figure out questions that we could ask that might get us to those kinds of, able to disaggregate the data in that way. Certainly, I can bring it back to our survey team.
Commissioner Greno-Shire.
I just wanted to reiterate that I think the CCTE may be a place to have this conversation and to develop these communities of practice. It's been my observation over the last couple of years that the segments are working really, really well together because of the huge shortage. So we would offer our assistance in any way to help with that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Klatt.
Thank you. I have a question about one of the surveys, and forgive me if this has come up in another place that I think it's on. Maybe I'm just not close enough. There we go. So if this has come up before, maybe you can clarify or refresh. But I'm always interested in the relationship between the candidate and the field experience supervisor. And so in the survey, does it address or focus on, I'm assuming it focuses on an evaluation of the teacher candidate and if they're prepared. Does it also address how that field supervisor was either supported or what if they felt that they got the support to be a field supervisor, and if they had the capacity within their regular job, to, like, how well they were able to work with that teacher? Is there anything in the survey that addresses that? The master teacher, right?
Terry, I don't remember right off the top of my head. No, not at this point in time. Interviews is where we get that at the site visit. We certainly ask that. In fact, that tends to be one of the more common findings is around selection, training, and evaluation of master teachers or mentors.
Okay, so there are interviews with those.
The interviews during the site visits.
Okay,
yes.
that
yes,
helps.
Absolutely. We always require those individuals to be talked to.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
And I think also with the new requirement in terms of the kind of training that we're providing, when, how much, we're also we can probably see some patterns across institutions when there are issues that surface there, as well as what kinds of innovative ways institutions are finding, program sponsors are finding to support those field supervisors. Yeah.
Okay. Do any other commissioners? Okay. Yes, Chair Darling Hammond.
I just wanted to really thank Catherine Kearney for the discussion of A+ versus formative assessment, and I think it's just very telling because here we are in a process with our students trying to help people learn how to use rubrics. They give you sort of feedback and then you improve your work, and it's always a process of revising and improving. So really appropriate for programs in teacher education to have that same experience and to change the mindset that we've had about, well, what's your score, to how are we all continuously improving and how do we use feedback for that purpose. So I think that was a very poignant and important point. And I think we want to hold on to that point as we are developing both the culture and the tools for this. And then to Commissioner Sloan's point about how do we share good practice and as well as problem solving. There's the possibility at some point that we ought to be thinking about of how do you create, whether it's in the context of CCTC or CCTE or maybe, the new center that is happening across the UCs or others, a way to really provide a lot of information for programs about the models, exemplars, syllabi, et cetera, in key areas that we want to be able to share with each other. So I want to just put that on the table as something for the set of us collectively to be continuing to think about. We had the experience, I know, at the beginning of the pact of programs coming together and saying, what are you doing about assessment? Because everybody was discovering that their candidates didn't know how to assess learning as well as they wanted them to. And so a lot of sharing took place with, course models and syllabi and strategies. And, we need to find a way to formalize some of the learning and sharing that should go on. To Commissioner Redmond's point, one of the things that we find when teachers do go out in the field is that they may not know enough about how to work with kids who've had traumatic experiences, how to deal with cultural competence, how to be prepared for the range of learning needs and contexts that kids are bringing. As programs are learning how to be responsive to that, we need to figure out how to share it. This is not something where we want to, have a few people holding on to it as a secret. So back to the continuous improvement theme. I hope we can, when we maybe come back to this early in the new year, think about some of those ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do any other commissioners have questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Olive.
I think you can help me and educate me on this, but do we have follow-up after teachers go to work for school districts as how it reflects back on the program? And the reason I ask that is because we as a district have a professional growth system which pairs incoming new teachers with mentor teachers for several years. And then those teachers that we choose not to reelect tend to be from certain programs, right? And I'm just wondering whether we have a system to kind of backtrack that.
Employer survey where we ask employers to tell us about the candidates they've hired. Our response rate is not as high as it is with our program completers because they're a captured audience, they're getting their credential kind of thing. But it is important information. I know that Terry's been working on trying to get the response rate up for that, but that's our primary source is the employer survey.
I think as data begins, as we expand our opportunities to share data with other state, from other state agencies where we have employment data tied to candidates, that we as an agency will be able to look at trends that may be occurring in terms of duration of employment and that critical year between year 2 and year 3 where really kind of the rubber hits the road to tenure and you really can see who the districts don't hold on to. So
and you have a discussion of that tomorrow.
That's what I was just about to tomorrow. Say. Yeah, I think he'll be really interested in Dr. Sakau's her research that she shares with you tomorrow morning.
Okay. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay, this is an information item, so no action is needed at this time. Thank you, Dr. Forbes, Ms. Hickey, Dr. Carney. At this time, I think we're going to take a break. How long? 10-minute break, so we will start again at 10:35.
I like the way that Bonnie is sitting so readily, quiet and alert.
Okay,
I
we are
like
going
the
to
way that
reconvene.
Janie is sitting forward in her chair. All right. You guys are out of control.
Yeah, we're going to 3C.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're reconvening, and we are actually going to be moving on to item 3C and continuing with 3B after lunch. So item 3C, is assignment monitoring of certificated staff in California by County Offices of Education 2015 to 2017, a report to the Legislature. This item is being presented by Roxanne Perdue. This is an action item. Ms. Perdue, will you begin?
Thank you. Good morning. I know that's a really long title for my agenda item, but it's this required report to the Legislature, and that has to be the title. It is on, but I'll bring it closer. I usually project pretty well, but I will bring it close. Yeah, and use my big teaching voice. So item 3C, despite its long title, is simply a data and narrative that we present to you biannually that goes to the Legislature, so you have to take action on it. And it gives data and narrative on teacher misassignments or actually educator misassignments, because it goes beyond teachers, and also on some other mandated data elements like local assignment options in the education code or teacher vacancies. So in the report this year, we saw a lot of increases, and so if those of you who looked through the report and maybe were alarmed by some of the large increases, I just wanted to give a caveat that a lot of the increases this year had a small n, so a small number. So it saw kind of inflated looking percentages. So before you get alarmed on some of those percentages, if something went from 2 to 4, you had a really large percentage increase. But our numbers are still looking relatively small, and I'll give you some context for that. So what is a misassignment? Simply, it's just an individual serving in a certificated assignment without the appropriate credential and authorization. So to be clear, it's not a misassignment if they're serving on a short-term staff permit or a provisional internship permit with the appropriate authorization. So they may not be complete with their preparation, but they have an appropriate legal authorization for their assignment. These are looking at people who may be credentialed even, serving out of field. So if an English teacher were teaching math, that would be a misassignment, which hopefully isn't happening too often. So we've been conducting assignment monitoring in the state for 30 years now, actually more than 30 years. And it first started in 1987 when the legislature passed a bill asking the commission to do a study on out-of-field teaching or misassignments. And so we did that study, and the rate of misassignment at that time was 8%. And they felt like that rate was too high. And so after that, they did another bill requiring assignment monitoring in the state for all educators. So normally there's 2 types of monitoring that we conduct. And the report today, so one type of monitoring is that 1/4 of the districts in the state are monitored each year. So at the end of 4 years, you have a picture of the whole state. Then there's a second type of monitoring, and that's what we look at in the report today. So the report to the legislature is biennial. And when we look at the data in today's report, we look at comparing the 2 years of data. So you look at whether we have percentage increases or percentage decreases. You look at trends. And the report also gives some context and narrative that says maybe why we're seeing the increase or decrease, as well as historically what we're seeing and what the state solutions we've been working on to kind of address those areas. So the report this year focuses on about 1/3 of the state. And 1/3 of the state's monitored annually. So in 2004, there was legislation as a result of the Williams settlement. That was a statewide lawsuit that was occurring that was settled, I think, during the Schwarzenegger's administration. So the Williams settlement had multiple parts to it. We call it the 3 T's, teachers, toilets, and textbooks. And it was looking at, so you had 10 rankings in the state at that time. 1 through 10, with 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. And that was called the Academic Performance Index, or API. And so the settlement had legislation saying, looking at those bottom 3 rankings, deciles 1, 2, and 3, let's look at the teacher assignment or educator assignment for those school sites. And the purpose of the settlement wasn't to say if you have textbooks for your students, if you have good facilities with working toilets, if you have a teacher who's prepared and authorized to be in your classroom, that, test scores are going to increase. The purpose was to say that's the right of every student to have those things, those basic elements. But the purpose behind assignment monitoring of those is that you're looking at those low decile schools where they have a lot of underprepared teachers and unauthorized teachers serving in those classrooms. And if you're looking at them every single year and you're working with those administrators every single year, are we seeing improvements? It's focused monitoring driving improvements in what's happening, and it is. So, just so you know, the Academic Performance Index on those rankings ended in 2012 or 13. We use the 2012 Academic Performance Index rankings still for monitoring today. And even though the ranking system has changed, in 2017, the State Board of Education adopted a new accountability system. So the API went away. But our section of the Ed Code says that we still have to monitor those 2012 API schools. So we've been looking at the same school sites since 2012. But we started looking at anyone ranked in decile 1 through 3. I mean, you move out of your rankings, so they changed since the 2004-2005 school year. And I have to say, I was around and did that report in 2004-2005, and our rate of misassignment in those school sites was 29% back then, so well above that 8% concern for those school sites. And now we're down to 3%, so focused monitoring works. So you're going to see increases in the report, but I'm going to keep giving you context because even though you're going to see high percentages of increase, overall, we're still at a low percentage. We're at that 3%. So we're down way below that 29% where we started. You know, it's still important to note that we had 15 years of decreases in these decile schools. And this year we're seeing increases for the first time. So we're going to look at kind of why that's happening, where those increases are occurring. One of the things that kind of exacerbates those increases, we believe, is the teacher shortage. We have more teachers serving out of field because of that, bringing in more teachers from out of state, out of country who maybe don't have the appropriate authorizations. Some of those things exacerbate those increases. So Table A gives you the raw numbers on the misassignments and those percentage increases for the state for those decile schools. It's also important, and I want to point out that while we look at those schools ranked in decile 1 through 3, that does not include charter schools. The Commission doesn't have authority to monitor charter schools. So Table B actually breaks out those misassignments by subject area, so you can look and see how many math misassignments or English misassignments were occurring. And I kind of want to focus on the purpose behind assignment monitoring. So I'd like to say it helps you identify a problem so you can work on solutions. And so in this report, there are 2 areas where we have kind of high areas of problem. Teachers that are serving English learners or English learner misassignments, EL misassignments, and special education misassignments. So we're going to talk about those today in depth and kind of leave the rest of the report for questions if you have them. There have been lots of statewide solutions surrounding these areas, and so we see a huge overall decrease, even though those areas still, remain our highest areas of concern. For teachers of English learners, here's some historical context for you. When I earned my credential in 1994, there was no embedded preparation for serving English learners in my program. I think I had one class called Multicultural Education. And so I subsequently had to go out many years later and complete additional preparation for serving English learners, and I earned what's called the CLAD certificate so that I was prepared and authorized to serve that student population. So here we have an area where we noted there was a problem, as the Commission noted there was a problem, and the Commission took action to embed English learner preparation in every multiple subject and single subject credential program in 2003. So now everybody coming out of a multiple subject or single subject prep program is prepared and authorized to serve English learners. And then in 2006, we embedded it in all special education programs. So there were two things that happened. I always say we kind of hit the problem from both ends. So on the one hand, we say everybody prepared in the future is going to be prepared and authorized. But then you have this population of teachers who, like myself, didn't have that opportunity to complete that preparation and earn that authorization. So we built bridges. And we think, how can we provide them with a bridge to prepare and authorize them? So as you see those numbers shrinking in the authorization of English learners, while it's still an area of concern, the numbers are just so much smaller than they used to be. It used to be such a huge number, especially for these Williams school sites. Williams didn't just have a focus on it had a really heavy focus on teaching teachers of English learners. And so it has additional requirements on looking at classrooms with 20% or more English learners in it. Just a lot of focus around the area of English learners in that. It had us looking more heavily at how students in those classrooms were being supported. And so that really focused our monitoring efforts in a way that it hadn't been before. I think before we were looking at, bilingual teachers. We were looking at, was it an ELD classroom? Was that teacher prepared to do ELD? But we weren't looking at that classroom that had that EL population that should have been receiving SEDI instruction or specially designed academic instruction in English. And that population of teachers that had no background or preparation in serving English learners, so they weren't supported in their efforts. And so problem solving happened on both ends. And so as we saw that solutions occurring, we saw the numbers drastically reduced. I mean, we still have it a high area, but I think those areas now are more focused on, because every California teacher is coming in with preparation and authorization, you have out-of-state and out-of-country teachers, particularly with the teacher shortage, who are being hired, and they didn't have that preparation perhaps in their state or country. So they're earning a California credential based on their out-of-state or out-of-country preparation, but they're not getting that English learner authorization. So it's, once again, making employers aware that they really need to look at that credential and see if the person has that authorization. They're so used to seeing it because there's so many California prepared teachers that they don't look at the credential. So it's kind of training them to see what the person's authorization says, and then help them go forward and earn that CLAD certificate or that English learner authorization for the future. We have emergency permits that they can get in between that will legally authorize them as long as they're making progress towards earning that authorization. So that's another kind of area. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we came about with some problems with ELD assignments. So Table D in the report provides the number and types of English learner misassignments. And it's broken out into two areas: ELD, or English Language Development, and SEDI, Specially Designed Academic Instruction in English. And so I want to talk to you first about the ELD misassignments, which kind of saw our largest area of increase. So in 2010, I believe, yes, 2010, the State Board of Education adopted new ELD standards. And they talk about two different types of ELD. They talk about designated ELD, which is sometimes referred to in the field as departmentalized ELD, though that simplifies it. And then integrated ELD, which we think of as ELD within the content area. So thinking about developing English language within your own content area. So after the State Board adopted the new ELD content standards, we had an English Learner Authorization Advisory Panel, ELAA panel. And they really took a look and dived into our standards and said, are our teachers prepared for both designated ELD and integrated ELD? Really taking a look at that ELD piece. We know they're prepared for SEDI, but are they prepared for both kinds of ELD? And what the panel discovered was they're really prepared for integrated ELD, but not so much designated ELD. So the commission took action to change the authorization for multiple subject, single subject, and special education teachers in, I think it was 2014. And they limited the authorization going forward for those teachers, saying that they're able to do that ELD within the content area, that integrated ELD, but they're not authorized to do that designated ELD, or sometimes what's referred to as departmentalized ELD. Then in order to do that departmentalized ELD, they needed to have additional preparation in order to earn that authorization. And so we saw an increase, because the change occurred in 2014, you didn't see the increase right away because you didn't have new teachers coming out with that more limited authorization. Now you're starting to see more teachers in the field as they come out of their preparation program with that more limited authorization. And employment agencies aren't used to seeing and distinguishing between the authorizations that occur in EL. So we've been doing a lot of technical assistance in that area, helping them really focus in on looking at the authorizations, thinking about how to bridge teachers to help them if they're going to be an ELD teacher, get that additional preparation and authorization to support that. So both in print and in meetings like our CCAC that we've talked to you about and working with county offices, we've really focused in on thinking about ELD. We'll be bringing out a code of correspondence, really focusing on looking at the two types of ELD, so really informing the field. So as those teachers that are newly coming into the profession continue to have that new authorization, there's an understanding about what it means to be prepared to do that designated ELD. So the other area of EL misassignment was SEDI. So if every California teacher is prepared and authorized for SEDI, why do we have SEDI misassignments? And I think I touched on that earlier. We're seeing, because of the teacher shortage, more teachers coming in from out of state and out of country. And so those teachers may not have an EL authorization at all, so that would encompass the SEDI ones that we're seeing. So that kind of covers our EL. So our actual highest area of misassignment, because that used to be our highest area of misassignment, EL, and it's still like the second highest area. But our highest area of misassignment's in special education. And that's continued to be a trend now for us. And partially that's seen an increase because we've changed the way we monitor special education, just like we changed the way we monitored English learner misassignments, where we focused on the students. We did that for our special ed. And the reason for that change, so we started looking at students in the classroom and whether the teacher was prepared and authorized to serve those students instead of looking at the title of the classroom. So then we saw an increase in the number of misassignments in those disability categories. And you'll see that in Table C, where we break out the misassignment by federal disability categories. So we started changing the way we looked at special education misassignments and monitoring them because there was legislation that occurred around autism spectrum disorders. And basically there was concerns that parents and others were expressing that, and teachers themselves, that they weren't prepared and authorized to serve students with autism. They felt underprepared in that area. You had only one special ed credential, what we call moderate severe, that was prepared and authorized to serve students with autism. But the students with autism were being placed in the mild moderate classrooms, not in that moderate severe classroom. And so the mild moderate teachers didn't have any preparation for autism. And you had parents saying, wait a minute, my kid's being with a teacher who doesn't really seem to understand the needs of my student. So at that point, thinking about solutions, right? The commission took action to embed the preparation for autism spectrum disorders, or ASD, into every special education credential program. So including the mild, moderate, and all of them. And so now every special ed teacher who comes out from 2010 onward, working on special ed now, but there was huge changes in 2010 also. So every teacher coming out since 2010 has an authorization to serve students with autism. So autism used to be our highest area of misassignment in special ed, and now the numbers are so far down and shrunk from what it was before because anyone coming out since 2010 is now prepared and authorized. At the same time, remember how I said we kind of hit the problem from both ends? So you have the teachers who are already serving in the classrooms who don't have that preparation, and then you have the new teachers coming out of the field. So we always solve from both ends. So we created what we call added authorizations in special education. So we looked at all those federal disability categories that that where you had students being served in classrooms where the teacher might not be prepared in that area, like autism. And for that current teacher in the classroom, we prepared a bridge document in preparation for them to get that additional preparation in autism, so they earned that additional authorization. You heard Ms. Hickey talk earlier about how we had a number of programs closing in the area of autism. That's that added authorization in special ed we talked about. And the reason why they're closing is because the need's not there anymore. You know, you're not having enough teachers who need that preparation anymore because you've closed up the gap on both ends. So what else? Preparation for special ed is changing. Authorizations for special ed is changing. You're taking actions right now and working on hearing agenda items for the last year on that area. We're changing our focus from federal disability categories of students. Right now our authorizations are specific. It says you can teach students with this disability category, but that doesn't really take into it doesn't really look at the fact that IEP doesn't say this student needs to be in a mild moderate classroom because they have this disability category. It doesn't really focus on student needs, so that because, you know, as part of IDEA, they should be placed in a classroom that's least restrictive environment. And so if their least restrictive environment is that mild moderate classroom, but that mild moderate teacher is not prepared and authorized in that disability category, suddenly you have a misassignment. And that teacher's not prepared in that area, just like the autism area that we talked about. So in future, what you've been discussing is focusing on student needs rather than disability categories. So once again, we're going to see kind of solutions to a problem coming forward. Overall, the legislative intent for assignment monitoring was that reduction we talked about, that if we identify problems, kind of twofold. If we have focused monitoring, we'll see improvements, which has happened. The other intent is that we'll identify problems and we'll work on statewide solutions, and that's what's happening. And talked about, I think, a lot of statewide solutions that were occurring in those two areas of need. One thing that is of note of the report, and I mentioned this earlier, we've had a downward trend for 15 years now for these decile schools. They were at such a high number, 29%, and every year we saw it improve. And so this is the first year where we're seeing increases. And so, you know, I took pause, I thought about it, you know, why we're seeing those increases and thinking about the teacher shortage and how that's exacerbated it all. And so what I would say to you is we're going to keep an eye on it, see if it's kind of an anomaly because of the teacher shortage, and we're going to see improvements with additional technical assistance provided, or whether this is an upward trend for us that we need to focus more efforts on. So where are we going in the future with assignment monitoring? So here's the exciting news. We're going to enter the 21st century finally. Right now, county offices of education have a paper-based process for assignment monitoring. And so each county office of education monitors the districts within their county. And the commission acts as the county office for our 7 single district counties in the state, which usually includes small rural counties like Alpine or Sierra, but also include San Francisco Unified. The county office and the district office are the same. They can't monitor themselves, so we serve as their county. So I experience what the county has experienced. I've been doing paper monitoring for a long time, and it's a laborious process. You're looking at master schedules from that principal at that school site. You're going out and visiting that school site. It's a really long process because you do site visits also. So what's changing? So we had a Senate Bill 840 in 2018. And it was a budget trailer bill, and it authorized us to build a new state assignment accountability system. We call it the SAS. We were proud of that acronym because we figured out one. And it also authorized us to share data with the California Department of Education. So now we're taking the Department of Education's CalPADS data, their student data, which includes course assignment data, and we're looking at our teacher credentialing data, and they're comparing the two, and it's outputting those exceptions or those potential misassignments. And then at that point, the SAS becomes a communication platform between the county and district so they can work on and resolve those issues. And so uploads those potential misassignments, lets them communicate back and forth if there's justification for it. Maybe there's another legal option that they've invoked that at that local level that we talked about, those local assignment options that authorizes the assignment legally. So lets them communicate back and forth about that and then come up with that final number of misassignments and then working on correcting those. Districts have 30 days to correct their misassignments. So the SAS, we're working with contractors right now. We just did our requirements gathering like yesterday. And the SAS is going to be fully operational in fall of 2019. So woohoo. So that concludes the presentation of this report. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the assignment monitoring of certificated staff in California by County Offices of Education 2015-17, a report to the Legislature, so that staff can transmit that report to the Legislature on or before December 31st, 2018. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We will now open for public comment. Seeing none, the comment period for this public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Yes, Commissioner Marks.
I just, as a new commissioner, I think I have acronym fatigue. But I'm just wondering if the LDS certificate meets the EL standard for added authorization.
So the old language development specialist certificate was for ELD and SEDI, so it encompasses everything. It's kind of like what we call the CLAD certificate now.
Okay.
Yes.
So
it's still good.
Well, I was just curious, just keeping track of my acronyms. And then another quick question. Is there any way for school sites that are designated Williams school sites, and this may not be a question for you, to exit?
So it used to be updated every 3 years, so they were able to exit. So it was based on student test scores, and then they ranked 1 through 10, and the bottom 3 were looked at more closely for all sorts of reasons, the toilet textbooks and teachers. And so every 3 years, they looked at them and re-ranked them. So, some would exit, some would change decile rankings. But since 2012, because the academic performance index isn't done anymore, we don't have any new rankings. But the law requires us to still monitor and report on those decile rankings from 2012. So they can't exit. We do have within the law the ability to say if you have 2 clean years where you've had no misassignments, we don't have to monitor you moving forward. But if they have any misassignments, then we continue to monitor them, yes.
Misassignments is defined by?
So misassignments defined in the education code actually under the section for the school accountability report cards.
Okay.
And
it's
so
on page 3C7 on this.
Yeah.
Okay. So no.
So they can't exit now. No, they have to stay there. We do have, and I didn't mention this as we talk about the future. Tomorrow, I believe you'll hear from our legislative division, and we had a bill last year to try and look at making changes to that, look at annual monitoring for all, not just the decile schools, and getting rid of the whole phrase about API and deciles from our monitoring. I think we'll be looking at, or you'll be looking at moving forward potentially with something again this year.
May I ask a follow-up?
Okay. Commissioner Hartwig.
I'd like to ask just a quick follow-up about that exiting the Williams monitoring. When, during the years in which schools could exit, what % of them did?
It was not very common to exit anyway. So we'd see some move from decile 1 to decile 2, for example. But some of the decile 3 schools would move into decile 4, and then some of the decile 4s would move down to decile 3s. So we would see some movement, some new schools added to the mix every year. But I want to say it was, it was less than 20%. So it wasn't very common to have them move out of the decile rankings very often.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Chair Darling Hammond.
First, thank you very much for both the presentation of the report and the commentary along the way, which was very helpful historically and educationally to kind of put this in context. The issue of misassignment is a really important one. The way that we're doing it and monitoring it in California right now is as you sort of noted, vestigial in a couple of ways. One being that, there's this 2012, designation. So that's really something we have to come back in Ed Code. And there's been cleanup work in Ed Code about getting rid of these references to the API and rethinking. And this is obviously a place where that's needed and, desirable. The other thing that I think is worth reconsideration is the definition of misassignment as we use it in California, because almost every form of misassignment is not included in the definition. The way it reads right now in 3C on 3C7 is the placement of certificated staff in a teaching or services position for which the educator does not hold a legally recognized certificate, credential, permit, or waiver. Well, by the time you take into account all of the substandard credentials, permits, and waivers, which mean that people have not demonstrated subject matter competence on the CSET or by taking a program. They may not have demonstrated, generally have not demonstrated teaching competence, but they haven't even demonstrated subject matter competence for many of those, but they're not included in the misassignment counts. So most of the people who are, by most states' standards, misassigned are not included in our misassignment count. So we're doing a lot of work to count the tiny number of people who don't even have any of those substandard authorizations, and then see whether they're increasing or decreasing for schools that were in a designation in 2012 that, doesn't even apply anymore. So I think this is an area where, it's a bigger policy than the report issuance. We should approve the report, but I think we should also, as a commission, be thinking about with our colleagues on the state board, because some of this comes from the board, and with our colleagues in the legislature, because there's Ed Code involved, what would be the appropriate way to enable the public to know and to do the work that's necessary to reduce the amount of actual misassignment that's going on in schools in any part of the system across the state. So I want to thank you, number one, for the report and the great historical lessons along the way, and also just put a pin in the fact that a later conversation should be about the broader topic of misassignment. Thanks.
I did want to say, from data perspective, that you do see those numbers in your teacher supply report that you get every year. So those underprepared teachers on those permits, you get those numbers from that. But Chair Darlingham is right about their designation.
And we don't really get even the crosshatch between having one of those permits and then are they actually subject matter competent, or, you just don't have a way to really know what's going on. So these are old laws, which had a good purpose and, provide some useful insights, but they're not really doing yet what we would want to do. And of course, one of the exciting things, in addition to going computerized with the districts, is that the CTC and CDE data can now be linked. There's an MOU that's in place, so we can look at what kind of credentialing people have and where they are assigned in a much more productive way. So
absolutely.
I'm excited about that.
I am too.
Yeah.
Long time in coming.
Geeking out together.
Okay, Vice Chair Hind.
My comment was along the lines of what Chair Darlingham was talking about with the misassignment, and I just wanted to bring light to the part about waivers. And I think what we miss when we talk about misassignment and waivers is how many of those teachers are in one school. So I happen to know of a school by where I live where 80% of the staff is on waivers, and this is a school that is a very high need school. I would say almost all the students are English language learners. And I talked with the principal at length, and his frustration is, of course, that his teachers are not prepared. And so just to see where all those, it's fine if you say we have waivers across the state. You don't think that we have all the waivers in one spot, but it really is the reality that a lot of these really hot pocket areas where the highest need is are not being served. So that's something to keep. Right. Right. And it just kind of, you don't think about it if you don't see it. So that's just something that I know for a later date, whatever we can do to tackle that issue. And on that note, I will move to approve the report.
Oh, we still have a few more comments. Commissioner.
It's a motion, so we can.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay, we'll continue this. Okay. Okay, well, now we'll have discussion. Commissioner Klatt.
Thank you. And I'd like to add to what sounds like kind of a wish list of things going forward. And I know that this report is legislated, so I don't know how much room we have in terms of the format of the data. But what would be helpful, I think, for me to understand the situation, and I'll use Table B as the example, but I think it's all of them, is we're getting reports in numbers and not percentages. And so looking at, like, for instance, industrial technology education in 2015-16, there were 49 misassignments. And in English that year, there were 81, which makes it look like English was almost twice as misassigned, if I'm doing the math right, or, it's a bigger problem. But my guess is that the percentage of English teachers, if we compare that to a percentage of industrial technology education teachers, that would make that situation look a lot different. And so it would be helpful, I think, at least for me, to have the context of that was 49 ITE teachers out of how many, because my guess is that there's a much bigger problem there maybe than in some of the other areas.
That's really good feedback. We weren't able to tell you that before. We didn't have the data resources to be able to give you what you're asking for. Now with the MOU with CDE, that's something we can examine perhaps. We can know the number of English classrooms there are in the state and know what teachers are being serving in those with the new data MOU that we have. So as we dig through that data and have our wish list, because we have a whiteboard wish list, we'll certainly take that into account. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Wall?
So one question I have is the background of the decile schools. I think that to raise awareness of the likely background, I'm going to guess now, that those are higher organizations with higher poverty levels, greater diversity, and I think we should highlight that in the report in order to encourage continued action. And that's one thing I don't see at the moment, which I wouldn't call for a change at this point, but I think as you go forward, I think it's really important.
Point well taken.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, actually I have one. That is for the misassignments in middle school and high school. How does it work if a teacher, they teach 5 classes usually, if one of their assignments was misassigned, but the other 4 were not? How does that count?
So that's a really good question, actually. And how it is now and how it's going to change in the future, which may see an increase in misassignments when we have the new automated system. So every misassignment represents at least one teacher for one or more periods of the day. But if I'm a teacher with an English credential teaching 5 periods of math, it counts as one math misassignment, not 5, because we like to say there's one teacher and one solution that has to happen. They need to be authorized for math, and then it takes care of their other classes. It can also be if I am an English teacher and I'm teaching math and history, I have 2 misassignments because there's 2 solutions there, math and history. In the future, when we have the new data system, because we're able to see every single period that the teacher's teaching, so I know how many periods of algebra they're teaching or geometry they're teaching, we're going to look at it class by class. We're going to look at enrollment of students in those classes, so we'll know how many students are being impacted as well as how many periods it's happening in.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay, I guess at this time we have a motion by Commissioner Hines and a second by Commissioner Rodriguez to approve the assignment monitoring of certificated employees in California by County Offices of Education 2015-2017, a report for transmittal to the Governor and Legislature. For all those in favor, say aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Perdue. Okay, so I guess we're moving on to 3D. The next item is 3D, update on work related to the intern program early completion option. This is being presented by Terry Clark. This is an information action item. Ms. Clark, will you please begin?
Good morning, Commissioners. This item continues the discussion of the requirements for the Intern Early Completion Program. As many of you will remember, we brought items to the Commission in both April and June of 2018, focusing on the early completion process. For those of you who are new to the Commission, the early completion option for intern teachers was enacted in statute in 2001 and allows interns to test out of the coursework requirements of their program and earn a preliminary teaching credential based on taking assessments only. The current set of requirements for interns seeking the early completion option allow them to bypass coursework upon passage of a test of teaching knowledge. That test is currently the APK, which is given by the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, and passage of an approved teaching performance assessment. Once candidates meet, it was a portion of the TPA originally, and once candidates meet these initial requirements, they have been allowed to opt out of all coursework while they complete and pass the remaining components of the TPA. They earn a preliminary teaching credential at that time. Candidates then who fail the APK or the TPA are expected to go back and complete the full intern program to earn their preliminary credential. With the change, though, in TPA models, there's no longer a clear first component that can also be used as an entry requirement to the early completion option. So in April, we provided information to you about the ECO requirements, the number of candidates who've taken the APK and also held intern credentials, and what we found is that about 200, under 200, around 150, 60 people each year have taken this option to get a preliminary teaching credential. You asked us to return with some options that would allow us to modify the entry requirement now that the TPA cannot be used as part of that entry requirement. So in June, we brought forth 3 possible ways to modify the ECO requirement. These are summarized on page 1 of this agenda item. During the meeting, a motion was made, seconded, and adopted that would require candidates to remain in all coursework until final passage of the full TPA. So staff began working to try to implement that action. If you'll now turn to Appendix A on page 4 of this item, staff has conducted a careful legal analysis of the current statute that enables the intern ECO. On page 5, sections B and C together of this section of statute specify that a candidate who passes the standardized entry assessment has challenged the program's coursework and cannot be held to do that coursework, and that they have one opportunity to take and pass a commission-approved TPA to complete their early completion option. If the candidate does not pass the TPA on the first try, he or she must complete the full intern program to be eligible to be recommended for a preliminary multiple or single subject teaching credential. With this analysis, it became clear that it would not be possible to implement the Commission's action from the June Commission meeting without a change in this statute. So we're now going to share what we think could be a really productive change in the statute. Normally, Joshua Speaks would be here sharing this, but I'm speaking for him. As the item shows on the second half of page 2, we have 3 suggested changes that we're proposing to you, and if you agree and direct us so, we would then seek an author to have these changes put into effect in the 2019 legislative year. The first section identified is actually no longer needed because it addresses what an intern program should do until the TPA is available. Well, the TPAs are available and have been available since 2008, so this section is no longer necessary and it should be removed. The second idea is to amend the section where it says waives coursework or challenge coursework, and instead make it very clear that all candidates, ECO candidates, are to remain in coursework until passage of the TPA. In addition to ensuring that all candidates are enrolled in the coursework, being supported and supervised, and therefore helping the K-12 students, this actually would also help the ECO candidate, because if an ECO candidate does not pass the TPA and has not been doing coursework, they're out of sync and they have to go back around, and it may even take an extra year. If they remain in coursework while they're working on the TPA If they happen to not pass, they continue remaining in coursework, finish learning and practicing what they need, and then they take the TPA at the end of the program, and hopefully they will pass. The third idea of what we would like to amend has to do with the section there that says if someone takes the APK but fails it, that the scores on the APK should be used to individualize their intern program. And we really think that this entire teacher preparation system is a system of multiple measures, and that it's inappropriate for a single measure, one standardized assessment, to be a thing that gets you out of your program. And asking intern programs to individualize based on that one assessment probably is really not appropriate. So we would actually recommend that that section of the Ed Code be removed, that we do not allow individualization based on taking that one assessment. This is my presentation. If you agree with these ideas and direct us as the action part of this item to seek an alleged change, we would begin to work with that process. Joshua Speaks would shepherd that, and we would work to make this come into effect. I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Sorry. We will... Thank you. We'll now open for public comment.
Oh.
And I have one public comment card, and Danette Brown. If you can, please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good morning. Danette Brown, representing the California Teachers Association. We want to thank Ms. Clark for bringing this item back, and we see that a lot of the testimony that was given in June really thoughtfully incorporated into this, and that we support this agenda item. We do have one clarifying question because I was a little confused on recommendation number 3, where it says amend the section of the Ed Code, ... But when you gave the presentation, you were proposing that that be eliminated. So we were just a little confused when it said amend the section, and then we heard you say take it out. So we just weren't sure what it was an amendment, what's a revision, what's a deletion. Just that, if you could have that clarified, we think we support that.
The reason that happened was my computer was running out of battery, and I did not have the item up in front of me while I was doing this presentation. So if you go ahead and turn to the section, I'm trying to find the section of code right now. Okay, it is section C, starts on the bottom of page 5 and goes on to page 6. It is the after the bold language. We would actually be changing this language about challenging. We would be clarifying in section C that an intern who is participating in the early completion option will remain in coursework until they have passage of the teaching performance assessment. And then the language after the bold language would actually be deleted, not just amended, because we would be suggesting that the score on the assessment shall be used. That sentence right there is just deleted, not an amended.
Read what you're saying? Read the sentence as it would read.
Scores on this assessment shall be used.
Where are you?
I'm on top of page 6.
6. Okay, I was on 5.
Scores on this assessment shall be used by the internship program in providing the individualized professional development plan for interns that emphasize preparation in areas where additional growth is warranted and waiving preparation where the intern has demonstrated competence. And what we're saying is that is a single measure, and have they really demonstrated competence by taking one single assessment when our programs are built on multiple measures in all ways. And so we are saying delete that sentence.
We support that. Thank you very much.
Oh, there may be more public comment. I'm sorry.
Actually, that's my only public comment card. Is there any? No more? Okay. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Here, darling, have it.
I think I do. I just also want to clarify what language we might want in the proposal, and I'm scrolling back and forth between the Ed Code and the proposed language. It seems to me that to achieve the goal that you articulated, that people would stay in coursework until they've passed both assessments, we would need to do more than just eliminate that sentence. And I was just trying to figure out, do we also need to say on page 5 at the bottom, or under B, an intern who chooses the early completion option must first pass the assessment required pursuant to paragraph perhaps 1 and 2 of subdivision A. Or I guess you have to pass paragraph 1 in order to qualify for paragraph 2, and then say individuals who have passed both assessments or something. Somehow to make it clear that we're talking about both.
We actually have a mock-up of the legislative changes, but we decided that was too deep in the details to actually put in this agenda item. We were definitely looking at modifying part of Section B and part of Section C. And the Section C that we remain would say something along the lines of an intern who is participating in the early completion option must continue in all coursework and be supervised and receive support until passage of a teaching performance assessment. That would take the place of all of what's in C right now. Section B is saying that an intern who wants individualized support may request it. It does not allow us to require the intern to have support because of the may in there. So we were looking at modifying Section C to actually just clearly state they must remain in all coursework, be supported and supervised until passage of a commission-approved TPA.
I would like to move that.
Perfect.
Okay, so I have a motion by Chair Darling Hammond and a second by Commissioner Rodriguez. We
can take more discussion.
Any further discussion? Okay.
Have we got everything in this motion that we need?
She said it perfect.
She said, I know you're accepting that amendment.
That's for item number 2. Is your motion also include option number 1 and number 3 to remove until a TPA is developed and to remove the option to individualize the program based on a single measure?
So now I'm confused again. What you just said, that sounded like what the Ed Code language was. Now, what is the question now?
The first thing we want to do is if you go and look at section.
This is deleting this section of the Ed Code that specifies what the intern programs are required to do.
We're looking at
yes, because we now have a TPA.
Right, we now have a TPA, and also deleting the part that requires a program, which is C, the second half of C, requires an intern program to individualize based on the initial standardized assessment, a single measure, and waive coursework for people who did well on that component.
Yes.
So it's 3 things.
So you could amend your motion to move
to
staff
include
recommendations.
Those 2 points as well.
Right.
Excellent.
Yes.
But I think that what Terry just did was a really clear statement of what the component would be, and that's not exactly here. So I just want to be sure we capture what you had stated.
We can definitely share with you the mock-up language that we have.
Yeah, and that was well stated, and I think it was very clear what we are saying. So I want that in the motion as well.
Okay, Commissioner Sloan.
So I appreciate all the work that has gone into this, the conversations we've had over time. I think we're in a much better place around this. I still continue not to like it. And so I am
the fact that we have it at all.
The fact that we have it at all, precisely. I am, our comments this morning, that Commissioner Hine and Commissioner Redmond about the potential concentration of unprepared or underprepared teachers in certain schools makes me wonder if there is a way that we can gather information about the impact of the ECO credential option. If there is a way that we can understand something from the candidates who went through it, I don't know if it's a specific survey about who they are and what they came with and why they feel prepared with an early completer option, as well as the providers, the intern providers who are supporting ECO candidates, and even the schools that they serve. Just so that we have information about whether this is really something we should have or not.
We can definitely work on that. Part of the challenge is, and we wrote it in the item in a fairly specific way, we cannot actually tell you clearly who is getting a credential based on ECO, because they are recommended as any other teacher is. And so what we did to get you the data for the April Commission item is we pulled everyone who had taken the APK exam, and then we went to see, did they hold an intern document? And then we went, did they earn a P5, a preliminary document? If they had all three of those, we decided they were ECO candidates. But we actually don't know if they were. Our current credential recommendation process has no way for an institution to identify this is an ECO candidate any different from any other candidate. So let us think about this a little bit. I understand you're looking for information from the candidates themselves, the intern providers, and the employers to find out about the efficacy and how effective these teachers feel and are. We will figure out what we can do.
Thank you. Clear and concise once again.
Okay. Any other further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion by Chair Darling-Hammond and a second by Commissioner Rodriguez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Clark. Okay, then on to item 3E. The next item is 3E, update on work related to the Child Development Permit. This item is now being presented by Erin Sullivan. This is an information item. Ms. Sullivan, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. And can I just start by saying no one on staff likes to have to follow our director at the table. So good morning, Commissioners. So this very brief agenda item is meant to update the Commission, its stakeholders, and the public on the activities around the updating and strengthening of the preparation and licensing of California's ECE professionals and the programs that prepare them. In June, staff presented for Commission information a final set of draft performance expectations that were crafted around the 4 key job roles of ECE professionals, which are assisting, teaching, mentoring and coaching, and administrating. Also presented was a final set of draft program guidelines intended for the programs that prepare California's ECE workforce. At that meeting, staff outlined some next steps and a timeline for those steps moving forward. These activities included releasing the draft performance expectations and program guidelines for stakeholder feedback via a SurveyMonkey survey. That survey had actually been released in May prior to the June meeting, but that was following Commission direction from the February meeting. So those surveys were originally planned to close on July 13, which left them open for approximately 2.5 months. Commission staff received feedback from the field that more time was desired. And so in honoring that request, we extended the survey deadline to September 15th. That extension of time did result in nearly double the amount of responses, so it was clearly the right decision. And in addition to survey responses, some of the ECE stakeholder organizations brought together their membership to take a really deep dive into the draft documents and then provided us with some really rich and detailed feedback, which we have as well as the survey feedback. In addition to extending the timeline for the requested feedback around the performance expectations and program guidelines, there have been a handful of significant reports released in the past 6 months that address everything from preparation of the ECE workforce to appropriate funding structures for ECE programs and meaningful conversations for program staff. And these are focused at both the national and state levels. Some of these reports are called out on page 2 of the item, and I did provide some links for you. Some of these reports and their authors are actually serving in an advisory capacity for California's newly elected administration, which has been very clear about its support of improving early childhood education in California. So why is all of this important? Well, it's an acknowledgement of our ongoing monitoring and collaboration with the field. And we, staff, continue to be very grateful for the opportunities and the supports that are brought to us by the stakeholders that we're working with. It's also an illustration of the level of activity in this field right now. It's worth noting again that the types of modifications that we are considering around the preparation of this workforce does represent a really significant shift from the way that it's been undertaken historically. Staff will be bringing a revised set of draft performance expectations and program guidelines to the Commission for its consideration at the February 2019 meeting. A preliminary analysis of the feedback, I would like to just mention, has definitely drawn staff's attention to some very specific areas for modification. Some of those include the topics of dual language learners, students with exceptional needs, which would be both what we would consider maybe special education students, but also gifted students, and working and collaborating with children's families. So you can expect to see some language around those areas that bring some better focus onto those areas when we bring the revised performance expectations and program guidelines to you in February. But this was just a way to let you know, initially we had hoped to bring those modified documents to you at this meeting, but with the extension of time on the surveys and with some of these reports coming out that really needed our attention and analysis, we pushed that timeline out to February. The field is very anxious. We are in contact with a number of folks, but they're really anxious to keep moving on this. So it was important to bring just this sort of small information item to let you know what the delay is and to also really communicate to the field and to the stakeholders where we are and what we're doing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We will now open for public comment. I have 6 comment cards, and so the first is Nancy Hurlbut. If you can, please come up and state your name and affiliation for the record.
The big one. Hi. I'm Nancy Hurlbut, and I'm a professor and chair of early childhood studies at Cal Poly Pomona. And I'm here representing Peach. Since we have some new commission members, Peach is a higher ed collaborative that represents about 50 institutions of higher ed in the state of California. We represent community colleges, CSUs, UCs, privates, and publics. So
I'm sure Commissioner Marks would particularly like to know what the acronym stands for.
Oh, Peach. Okay. I hope I get it right. Peach is Partners in Education, Articulation, and Coordination. I always say collaboration. That's why I looked at them in higher ed.
Got that?
Got that. So we've now said we're just a higher ed collaborative.
Right.
That seems so much easier than going through all of that. And I have the concept of collaboration, but I always say other things. So, okay, so there are 3 things I want to say. First off, I want to underscore what Erin said and how happy I was and how happy the organization is that a few things were brought up. Social emotional development was brought up in the survey. As Erin said, exceptional needs. There was also brought up in the need to include play as intentional language in the TPs and APs, and so that's really important. Family engagement is also really important in early childhood, as is health and safety. And so we want to make sure these concepts are included. The second thing we really want to emphasize is that what's really important to us is that the TPEs and APs represent early childhood. One of the things we know is that there's really a robust need for reflective skills and dispositions and knowledge in early childhood. And a little bit of a fear that the field has is that in order to make it a clear pathway with multiple subjects and the K-12 system, what we may end up doing is losing the importance of early childhood. And we do recognize that it is important for our teachers and our children to have a pathway and that there's a clear pathway, but that pathway or career ladder has to be an early childhood pathway and not a K-12 pathway. Even though I understand the alignment. So that's one thing the field is really concerned about, that push-down effect. You know, for years, early childhood has talked about how if you can do it in first grade, let's do it in kindergarten. If you can do it in kindergarten, let's do it for 4-year-olds. And we're very frightened that push-down will happen, because a 4-year-old should not be being taught reading. You know, so they're taught the principles of emergent literature, but not how to read per se. They learn reading by being read to instead of, you know, very specific skills in reading. So that's one thing we want to make. Another thing we want to acknowledge is that...
Please come to a close.
Am I out of time?
Pretty much, yes.
Just one more thing is we want to acknowledge that this permit and these TPEs, although they're mandated for public child care and public institutions, they will become kind of the gold standards for even the non-public, because that's what we will use when we train our people. So it's really important that since these are the cutting edge and new ones, that they become really early childhood TPEs and APs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jan Fish. Again, if you can, please come up, state your name and affiliation for the record.
Thank you. Yep, she left it on. That's great. Thank you very much for this opportunity to really continue on in other elements of our arguments and our appreciation for being collaborators in this process and for being invited to talk with Phyllis and Aaron by Phyllis and Aaron to talk about this process and the critical nature of competency-based preparation of early childhood educators 0 to 8. We really appreciate the listening ear that Phyllis and Aaron have had all the way through, and our listening ear to their constraints, requirements, responsibilities, as well as their depth of knowledge and expertise. So we would like to also start by saying that we're very happy to look at the research and consensus documents that Aaron and Phyllis cited in this agenda item, and want to, we delve deeply into these items. The Getting Down to Facts Early Childhood Education report by Stipek and colleagues that is part of a series of pre-K-12 technical reports. The TW Birth to 8 focused on Birth to 8, Transforming the Workforce, the Transforming the Financing in Early Childhood, which is 0 to 5 focus, because that's where the money challenges really are, the financing challenges, and our own National Association for the Education of Young Children, 0 to 8. In reviewing, in preparation for this meeting, we note that all of those reports ask for early childhood prep to be competency-based. So we've got full confirmation in the field and in CTC of that need. We also see that they cite research that says the higher the teacher ed level, the more positive the child outcomes. To quote the report on page 108 of Getting Down to Facts, teaching young children is as complex as teaching older children, and it requires a similar level of knowledge and skills. This is certainly in support for increased depth and breadth of competencies, knowledge and skills and dispositions in the preparation, so that early childhood educators share position, compensation, and also preparation parity. There are only 3 states in our country that have parity in this way. And California is certainly not one of them. In terms of the empirical evidence regarding ECE teacher competencies.
Can I have you please summarize and come to an end?
I'm sorry?
Can you, the time is, can I have you summarize and come to
Okay,
an end?
I will summarize. Then we're looking at a rain shadow of preparation where K-12 teachers shy away, says the STIPEC report, away from from child-initiated activities, and while preschool teachers shy more away from direct academic instruction. And I would suggest here that we're looking at a need for those preparation systems to inform each other so that teachers' skills of observation are increased to build child's skills and learning at all ages 0 to 8. Going on, we'd just like to urge, while it's a very short time and we understand the constraints of the writers, we would like to ask for the continued inclusion of ECE specialists in the development of the TPEs for the February item in order to have them co-constructed by the field and not to lose that ECE 0 to 8 voice in the first ever TPEs and APEs in early childhood from CTC. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Tony Isaacs, who will be followed by Carolyn Crolette. Ms. Isaacs, if you can come up, state your name and your affiliation for the record.
Hi, thank you, Commissioners. My name is Tony Isaacs. I'm the Program Director of PEACH. I'm also an adjunct faculty at Moore Park College, which is in Ventura County. I want to start off thanking Aaron and Phyllis for their ongoing collaboration with the early childhood field, for their flexibility in extending the survey deadline, and for their extensive work on revising the performance expectations and the program guidelines. PEACH is encouraged by the recognition of greater emphasis around the California early childhood competencies. As mentioned by Aaron, one of the documents that they had examined was the NAEYC Professional Standards and Competencies for Early Expectations. PEACH also agrees with the survey feedback and with NAEYC that there is a need for early childhood specific competencies. In particular, we want to point out that NAEYC actually identifies a separate standard area for developmentally, linguistically, and culturally appropriate practices, and a separate standard for family and community engagement. We also agree with specific competencies that were pointed out through the survey, and which are also recognized in NAEYC's document. For instance, family engagement is mentioned in 3 out of the 6 NAEYC standards. Dual language learners is mentioned in 3 out of the 6 NAEYC standards. Special needs and looking at strengths of children with special needs is mentioned in 3 out of 6 of the NAEYC standards. Child-initiated play and inquiry-based learning is mentioned in 5 out of 6 NAEYC standards. Health, nutrition, and safety is mentioned in 4 out of 6 NAEYC standards. And the Child Care Aware report also indicates that California is number 48 out of 50 when it comes to child care licensing regulations. And so we definitely want to make sure health, nutrition, and safety is essential in the competencies. And finally, we want to look at how teachers use collaboration with families, the community, and colleagues. And that's also mentioned 3 out of 6 times in NAEYC standards. I want to thank you for all of your time, and we look forward to PEACH continuing our collaboration with CTC. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Carolyn Crolette, followed by Antonia Lopez. If you can come and state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good morning. My name is Carolyn Corlott. I'm Senior Policy Analyst with Early Edge California. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization focused on early childhood education issues for children 0 to 8 in California. And first off, I would just like to thank the Commission for its work to date on moving California towards a competency-based early educator preparation system. And we were very pleased to provide feedback on the draft performance expectations and program guidelines. And we're also very pleased to see your acknowledgement of the need to further emphasize socio-emotional development, play-based learning, and dual language learners, particularly the importance of fostering the continued maintenance and development of a child's home language as they develop English. And then we also commend you for aligning this work to ongoing related efforts at the state and national level, including the NAEYC professional standards and performance expectations for early educators. And so we just look forward to continuing to work with you and serve as a resource as you develop and incorporate the field feedback and develop the revised version of the performance expectations and program guidelines. And just thank you once again for all of this work.
Thank you. Next is Antonio Lopez, followed by Josefina Notsene.
A little bit of a squeeze.
Sorry, if you can, please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Buenos dias. My name is Antonia Lopez. I'm a co-founder of the Campaign for High Quality Early Education, better known as CQEE. Formerly, I was the national director of the National Council of La Raza, based in Washington, D.C., but working with early childhood bilingual education programs, serving over 80,000 children across the country. So, first, CQEE is a coalition of sorts. We have dual language experts, researchers, practitioners, administrators that serve children throughout California, and some are consultants across the country. We want to first start off by thanking you all for the commitment to bring the quality of early education to all children to the state where it was many years ago when many of us started in early education. We were leaders, and now we're followers. We really commend the work that Peach has done for decades to ensure that what we know, what we've learned, what we've experienced as quality early education is expanded and reaches all of our kids. Now, that being said, and we really do appreciate Peach for their commitment to the competencies in early childhood and to be able to incorporate them into TPEs and TPAs. But we do want to caution the Commission on relying on the dual language learner competencies that are in place now. Unfortunately, those competencies were developed beginning in 2007. Some of our members were very active involved, were finally adopted in 2011. But you all remember that that was a time when California was an English-only state, one of 33 English-only states that had been ravaged by all the anti-language bias that have become institutionalized. So while we support the competencies being incorporated, we urge the Commission, as do other reports, some of which were cited today, to really understand what teachers need to know and be able to do, not only to help dual language learners learn English, but to be able to access content through their first language, to be able to access collaboration and partnerships with their parents, because language will be embraced and learning in the first language in the home will only support the child at school. We know that fourth graders in California, whose first language is not English, are performing at abysmal levels. One would say that probably 80% of our fourth graders are not achieving in reading and math, and that is in part because they have not had the opportunity to access content in their first language as they acquired English. And so all the ravages of the emotional and social isolation that they experience are only are the results that we see in the academic achievement. We appreciate that the Commission has been willing to accept our comments. We've submitted comments through the surveys and through a written letter, but we have not had the opportunity to meet. And so we urge the staff to give us opportunities so that we can go through the material that you've looked at and see how you've strengthened the dual language competencies and the cultural and family competencies, so that we will be able to be assured that California can take its rightful place as one of the largest states in the country with the largest number of dual language learners, and so we can make sure that the academic achievement gaps that currently exist will at least have the opportunity to be diminished. So with that, we want to thank you again for your hard work. Let's make it happen for all of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Josephina Notsune, followed by Lynn Scott. Please, if you can, state your name and affiliation for the record.
Hi, Josefina Ramirez Natsuna with Children Now. Children Now is a statewide policy, research, and exteriorization focused on children's well-being prenatal to 26. Wanted to thank the Commission for all their work. It's critical right now that the Commission gets to the permit revision, especially given the potential that this upcoming year, the multi-year policy and budget proposals to fundamentally strengthen and expand the early care and education system. And we see the strengthened workforce qualifications and capacity as part of that three-legged stool when we talk about rates, slots, and workforce, right, and quality. So the CTC's revision of the permit matrix provides a lever for strengthening the workforce and system overall. We would be supportive of the work group reconvening and taking a fresh look at their recommendations, perhaps even going farther, especially now in light of rate restructuring conversations and eventually a tiered reimbursement system with incentives and supports for reaching additional standards. So we look forward to working with you all, and we ask you to think bold and have a big vision.
Thank you. Our last comment card is Lynn Scott. Again, please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. We've just passed midday. I'm here on the. I'm a faculty member at Cal State East Bay in teacher education. I'm here today on behalf of CABTE, California Association for Bilingual Teacher Educators. It's an affiliate of CABE, California Association of Bilingual Education. And I want to echo what we've heard in the public comments thus far regarding the emphasis on dual language learners and how that goes hand in hand with social emotional development. Superintendent Torlickson's initiative, Global California 2030, which I anticipate will be embraced and continued with Superintendent-elect Tony Thurmond in his work, really looks at how we approach the development of the home language of young children throughout our school system, so that it's not simply an add-on later on. When we look at K-12 education, we have the added bilingual authorization. We're not talking about that for a child development permit. We're seeing that as an integrated feature that early childhood educators are supporting, whether they speak the child's home language or not. They are knowledgeable and supportive, so we're not simply transitioning English learners into English only. And that is a major change. And I want to commend the CTC staff's work, and I want to emphasize there are many organizations that want to be a resource to really think about how we build upon the ECE competencies and grow those so that those influence the K-12 TPEs. rather than the K-12 TPEs, which have changed but do not have the same focus on dual language learners that is integrated and embraced from the outset. So I want to kind of put that in front of the commissioners to think of as you move forward with this very important work. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last comment card. Do commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Okay. Yes.
Surprise.
Commissioner Brown.
It is encouraging and exciting to have you come back with this update. I think that these new materials endorse what we're trying to do here. This is a huge lift, but this big lift matters to our youngest children of this state. We really need to have public schooling for the youngest children of our state, and this is a way to begin to get there. I have a few questions, and not really for Aaron, but just thinking ahead as we move forward with this work. What are our next steps? What are our next steps? And do they include looking at what other states do and what other nations do to move towards a credentialing and the appropriate preparation for teachers who are going to work with public school, kids in public school who are younger than kindergarten?
Are you going to respond? Well, no, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was taking notes.
We'll keep talking.
So we certainly are trying to take in, and I say we, Phyllis and I, and everyone else here at the commission who is pitching in on this work, are trying to take in as much information as we can regarding how early childhood professionals are prepared across the nation and outside the nation. I will say that historically, California has fallen to feeling that we need to be very, very clear that what we're doing is best for our students. So while we certainly can take some cues and have over the years from other states and other countries, in the end, what we have to distill down is what's best, what works best for our populations, because we have our own unique populations here, not just of students, but also the workforce.
I would just add to that. I'm sorry I stepped out briefly for the early part of this, but I think that we've been looking at this for a while, and I think some very good thought has gone into the development of these standards, program guidelines, performance expectations, and I think that the commission agreed a while back that it was really quite critical to get that piece done first, to talk about what it means to be competent to work in this sector, and then to build from there. We have a robust set of recommendations about what to do about our permit, and that included, in its larger review, what to do about our early childhood specialist credential that exists but is kind of in a dormant state, and what use it might be put to in the future. So I think that those questions will come obviously and logically next. As we do this work on and bring the performance expectations forward to capture, as Aaron has said, the what is California's priority for the knowledge base and skill base of its early childhood workforce. But then beyond that, we've got some very technical work that we do, which is how we know that programs are meeting them and candidates are meeting them. And we have a very old system of transcript analysis right now that's what we use to determine whether candidates have met our coursework requirements for this permit. We really are going to have to, in the coming year, after we get these in place, dig into what are the legitimate ways that we could move that system forward. So I see those as kind of three big next pieces of work, but that also is going to be right alongside whatever agenda emerges as we launch a new legislative session, a new administration, both in the superintendency and in the governor's office, around their priorities. So I think we're in a very good position right now, and having brought a lot of effort and thought to bear on what it is these individuals need to know and be able to do in order to be effective in the future with kids. So the rest of the system then will need to blossom around that within the context that California allows and puts forward financially and the expectations that get set. Did I repeat what you said already? Okay, that's. I'm sorry, I was out of the room while you were saying it. I didn't.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that, because the other part of it was as has been mentioned, a new superintendent, a new governor, a new look for our early learners, and then from the field, a real need to look at what's developmentally appropriate for teaching practices and supports for not just the children, but for the teachers. And I think that's the piece that, in a way, our early education system has been very diverse, but at the same time, the public has really pulled away from making any decisions that support not only the appropriate preparation, but the credentialing and therefore the legitimacy of early childhood teaching as part of the educational system. So you can tell I'm really looking forward to that piece. I'm gonna try to stick around, because I think we are at a place where the work that we've already done is a great base, and it needs to be set so when and push the system to say what happens to children in the first 5 years changes their whole life, not just as a school student, but as an adult. And we want to take that responsibility here in terms of the credentialing piece we can do. So, thank you.
Okay, do any other commissioners have questions or comments on this item? Yes, Commissioner Redmond.
I appreciate all the work on this and where we are on it, and it's going in a good direction, so thank you. There were comments from the public that, one of the comments that really struck me, what I think has been a theme in some of our work, is not just the focus on developing a real credentialing field, and then a field really credentializing early childhood education and educators, but in being able to have that whole field influence and provide lessons for the rest of K-12 education and beyond. And I've had folks more recently really talking about how teachers really need to understand child development. And then I'm wondering if, how we integrate what is really valuable as we're doing this in early childhood education into the rest of K-12 education. I'm just wondering how we think about integration as we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. And part of that is how it goes, rather than the push down, the push up.
Right, and if I can address that, there is plenty of research that calls for better alignment and better articulation between the early ed years and then the K-12 years for students. I will say that because that conversation is new, I think that it makes some folks in the early childhood education profession a little bit nervous. I mean, this field hasn't been included in a lot of the K-12 conversation. And so, as would with any group, when you open the closet and shine a bright light in, the initial reaction is to, sort of to turn away from that. The field is certainly ready to be part of that conversation, but there's a lot of approach avoidance. And I don't like the word avoidance, but there's just a nervousness. So the research shows that it's beneficial for children and for their families. I think that that's undeniable, and there are a lot of people in the early childhood profession that recognize that, but it needs to be done in a very meaningful and very careful way.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Commissioner Marks.
I just had a quick question. So we're talking about researching and really understanding child development, and I'm just wondering, is part of that conversation also this new emerging research about brain development and how a child's brain develops, and seems really key, especially for early childhood. So.
Again, any questions, comments from commissioners? Seeing no more, this is an information item, so no action is needed at this time. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I think, are we now recessing for lunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary suggesting that she
we
would
may
be generous.
It's a little sloshy and rainy out there, and so I'm wondering if we should take an hour and 15 minutes and come back at 1:30.
Walk slowly.
Okay.
Yeah, be careful. There are spiky balls that fall out of the trees right there on that sidewalk, and make sure you don't step on one. That's
Don't step on the spiky balls.
I guess I'll recess
yes,
to 1:30.
somebody cleans it every day, but it's been windy. There we go.
Okay, I guess we'll restart. Right now we are going to restart with item 3B. Item 3B is an update on state-funded grant programs, and this is an information action item. This item has an agenda insert and will be presented by Donna Glassman-Sommer, Iore Osamwani, and Phyllis Jacobson. Ms. Jacobson, will you begin?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This agenda item brings you an update on 5 state-funded grant programs. 3 of these, the California Classified School Employees Teacher Credentialing Program, the Integrated Teacher Preparation Program, and the California Center on Teaching Careers /CalEd program, are focused primarily on teacher recruitment and development. 2 of the programs, the Local Solutions to the Shortage of Special Education Teachers and the Teacher Residency Programs, I'm sorry for all of these long words, but we will abbreviate them subsequently, are focused primarily on teacher recruitment, preparation, retention, and support. Ms. Osamwani will now discuss the California Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Staff will be providing an overview of 5 state-funded grant programs along with the 2018 annual report to the Legislature located in Attachment A. The item 3B is an action item. Once approved, the report will be transmitted to the Legislature by January 1st, 2019. The first state-funded grant program on this agenda item is the California Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program, Classified Program for short. The Legislature approved a combined total of $45 million for 2 separate rounds of funding for the classified program. $20 million in 2016 and an additional $25 million in 2017. The program provides up to $4,000 per participant per year for up to 5 years. The awarded LEAs use this fund to support tuition, fees, books, and related services for participating classified staff. This state grant funding has provided a total of 2,250 annual participant slots in both round 1 and 2. The classified program is designed to address the state teacher shortages in math, science, special education, and bilingual education, and provide those classified school employees an opportunity to complete their undergraduate education and teacher preparation to become California credentialed teacher. Moving on to the 2018 annual report to the Legislature on page 17. Per statute, the Commission is required to report annually to the Legislature on the update on the classified program. For round 1 of the classified program, the 25 awarded grantee LEAs are shown in Table 1 on page 18, along with the number of allocated participant slots. Note that 17-18 school year was the second year since the Round 1 LEAs began implementing their programs. 17-18 data report was due to the Commission by July 2018. Data received from the 25 Round 1 LEAs show that 97% of the classified employee program slots were filled during the 17-18 school year. Of the 25 LEAs, it's noteworthy to highlight that 17 were able to fill all of its participant slots, with a number of these LEAs reporting waiting lists of classified employees wanting to participate in the program. The authorizing legislation required eligible classified programs participants to have a minimum of 2 years of post-secondary education or an associate degree. 73% of all Round 1 program participants held a bachelor's degree, as shown Table 2 on page 19. The educational standing of the program participant is shown in Figure 1 on page 20. As of July 2018, 5% of Round 1 participants have completed the teacher preparation program, earned a California teaching credential, and are employed as teachers by their respective LEAs. The LEAs place a priority on recruiting and enrolling classified employees who indicated an interest in obtaining a California credential in one of the LEA's identified shortage areas. Figure 3 on page 22 illustrates the self-identified race/ethnicity of the classified employees. The largest racial/ethnic group of the recruited classified employees are 42% Hispanic or Latino/Latina, followed by 30% white, and approximately 6% of the participants are Black or African American. As previously mentioned, Round 2 classified RFP was issued by the Commission in 2017. A total of 28 LEAs were awarded grants. In this round, an additional 1,250 classified employees are being supported to become California credentialed teachers. Round 2 grant recipients are listed in Table 3 on page 23 of the item, alongside the number of participant slots allocated and the numbers of classified employees enrolled in 17-18 school year. As with Round 1, Round 2 data report was due to the Commission by July 2018. 65% of all Round 2 program participants held a bachelor's degree, as shown in Table 4 on page 24. Educational standing of classified school employee program participant by grantee LEA is shown in Figure 4 on page 25. 2% of all Round 2 participants have completed your teacher preparation program, earned a California teaching credential, and are employed as teachers by their respective LEAs. Again, the LEAs place a priority on recruiting and enrolling classified employees who indicated an interest in obtaining a California credential in one of the LEA's identified shortage areas. Figure 6 on page 27 of the item illustrates the self-identified race/ethnicity of the classified employees. The largest racial/ethnic group of the recruited classified employees are 41% Hispanic or Latino/Latina, followed by 34% white, and roughly 6% of the participants are Black or African American. In summary of the 2018 annual report, both Round 1 and Round 2 data show that LEAs reported using grant fund as a means to help meet the local teacher shortage needs. Both rounds are ethnically and racially diverse and are serving classified employees from a range of classified positions. Round 1 grantees are in full operation, and your participants are effectively and efficiently moving through the undergraduate degree process and or teacher preparation process. In addition, programs that either had participants or completed the program, or participants who, for personal or other reasons, had to drop out of the program, were able to replace this candidate in a timely manner, thus increasing the total number of classified employees able to be served by the program. Majority of Round 2 grantees reported that the classified program are now operational, since most of 17-18 activities involved recruitment of classified employees. The Commission will continue to work with all these programs Outcome data provided in the 2019 annual report to the legislature will be augmented with data from the first full year of implementation from round 2 grantees, as well as with continuing implementation data from round 1 grantees. At this time, Dr. Jacobson will report on the remainder of the grant item. Thank you.
Thank you, Iori. So moving on now to the Integrated Teacher Preparation Program. This program was authorized at $10 million in 2016 by the legislature, and the purpose was to provide 1 or 2 year planning grants to IHEs that offer commission-approved teacher preparation programs, either to develop new or to adapt existing undergraduate integrated teacher preparation programs. In this type of program, candidates typically would earn a bachelor's degree and a preliminary multiple or single subject credential in 4 years. The authorizing legislation for this competitive grant program mandated that the Commission give priority to proposals for integrated programs in special education, math, science, and/or bilingual education, and in addition, programs that would partner with a California community college in developing the 4-year integrated program. So Table 1 on page 2 of the original agenda item provides the listing of the grant recipients and their planned integrated credential programs. Table 1 in the agenda item insert adds information about which community colleges are participating along with the grantees. Together, these institutions are collectively developing or modifying 90 integrated teacher preparation programs. As shown in Figure 1, 27% are for single subject math or science, almost a quarter are for education specialist, and about a fifth include a bilingual authorization. Most programs plan to enroll their first cohort of candidates in fall 2018. Although these programs do have an annual data reporting requirement, as described on page 5 of the agenda item, their first report is not due to the Commission until the end of December 2018, and so we will be bringing you an update on these programs at a later time. Next is the California Center on Teaching Careers, and I will now turn this over to Donna Glassman-Summer for her report.
Is that better? Okay. Sometimes I think my New York voice reaches everyone. It's my honor to really be in your presence and to be able to really present what we've been doing in this last year with the California Center on Teaching Careers. It's been very exciting this year. As you know, you've seen our mission before, and we're here to really support and help with the shortage of teachers that we are all experiencing in California. We continue to work with our regional partnerships. Thank you, Rhonda. They are expanding, and particularly this year with the CalEd grantees. We are doing more work with different county offices where they were recipients with the CalEd grants. These are some of the strategies that we have worked on. You have an executive summary, I believe, in your packet. Uh-oh. It's a light show here.
Help. Donna, while we're waiting for that, you might just want to spell out for commissioners who weren't here and don't know what CalEd is.
Yes.
Just what that is.
So the CalEd grant came through the legislation in July of, I believe, 17. And those grants are 16. And they work in coordination with the Commission for us to do a grant competition having to do with STEM, bilingual education, both for teacher preparation and for preparation of administrators. And so we worked together, and there were 32 grants that were actually granted to 23, I believe, agencies. So some of the organizations got both a teacher and an administrative prep. And those grants went from $59,000 to, over $1 million in grants. We have met with every single one of those grantees. It took a little while to get the money out to them as a result of really finessing where money came from and how it was going to get out. And it's all in the hands of the grantees. We had everything. The center was duly poised once the money came to the center, and it then went out very quickly. We then followed up very quickly with them in regards to how they were going to now look at meeting their goals, setting up their budgets, and looking for any assistance that we will continue to give them through the grants. And we've been really pleased to see how happy they are about receiving their grants and the work that we've been doing together with them. We really try to do things virtually. Many of them are actually in quite remote areas. So they are very interested not only in talking to us, but talking to each other, and that's in our plan for this coming year. Some of the other strategies that we've really worked on this year has to do with our marketing campaign, and we launched a large PSA campaign with videos that went, we showed, I think, some of them last year. Here, we did a great campaign with that where we contacted every single county office and asked them, who do you know in communications in your local communities? And rather than waiting to find assets that we're going to donate time, we asked them to then connect with whomever they work with locally, because you always see the local schools kind of on TV doing public service announcements. So we found that that was an effective way to get that information out with not only our efforts, but with the county offices and the district's efforts. We'll continue doing that this year. We've started working with Sacramento County Office of Ed to do some more videos. We just made a video on the residency programs, and we went up to San Francisco and started filming when they began their program, and our goal was to follow them throughout the year because we feel a lot of candidates coming in don't really understand or know what a residency program is about. So this is a way to really get the word out to both districts as well as prospective candidates about being in a residency program. We have really been busy with our toolkits and putting them on our portal and working with our agencies. We have met this year with our alliance, and our alliance has been a wonderful group that's been a great think tank, and I really want to thank Patrick Shield for he has been our facilitator, and Christian Michael, and they really have shepherded that team. We've had 99% attendance in every it seems like we have more folks that seem to be joining every time we meet. And so we're excited that it's become a way for us to really sit down and talk about some of these issues, and they feel like we're really solving some problems or getting them out on the table and trying to figure out how to work with them. And it resulted in us having cross-communication on different things, which was supporting the conference series on the residency and our virtual fair that I'm going to talk about and highlight in a minute. That our portal, as I think Catherine was referring to, kind of Match.com, is kind of it's a combination of Facebook and Match.com. And it's been very, very successful in terms of pushing jobs out to candidates. So if I'm a student who's graduating and I don't have time to go to a fair because I'm still in school, I put in a zip code, and then the jobs from that zip code gets pushed to me. and I could put multiple zip codes in there, and the same thing happens with school districts. So they put in a set of criteria, and the candidates that are in the pool actually get pushed to them. We are in partnership with EdJoin, so it is not only those who are registered on our portal, but it's also who's registered in EdJoin as well. So that's become a really powerful tool in helping districts find exactly who they want. And for those, we have heard over and over from the universities that it's hard to connect them because they graduate after a lot of the hiring starts happening. And this fair that I'll talk about too is another solution that will really address that. But we're excited we've been talking a lot to the districts about we have to start recruiting in September for the next year. So this is a picture of our virtual job fair. It's actually in progress this week. We're holding it from 3 o'clock to 7 p.m. Tuesday through Friday. Our goal was to have 1,000 candidates. We have 80 school districts. We had 100 booths, and that's what we started off with. Of that 100 booths, we have 80 school districts all over the state, and we have 25 universities. There are 3 buckets. One bucket is for folks who have an interest in coming into teaching and have never had experience or don't know much about it. Then those who may be searching for programs, and that would be in the same bucket. Then those who are graduating, and then those who are credentialed. So we've prepared our virtual fair, and it's a little hard to see, but this is what it looks like. You go, if you see in the hall, there's two or three auditoriums, and the auditorium on the right will take you to the districts. The ones on the left will take you to the agencies. So if you want to go talk to universities, you go one way. If you want to go talk to the districts, our website is there. We have our residency video actually playing, as well as Jim Bresch's research. So it's also for the districts to really have information as well. And then there's a place for webinars. And there's 3 webinars actually a day that we're doing. And it could be something like resume writing to how to interview. And we have different topics every day that's really listed. So this is kind of a quick look at what each district actually sets their own booth up, and so they make it look like a booth as if they were in attendance of a real fair. What I love is they have swag bags. So if you are attending, you can pick something up from a district and put it in your own swag bag. But let's say there is a webinar going on, but I want to go talk to a district. Those webinars are getting recorded. You can put them in your swag bag, and you can listen to them later. So this is now, we've done 2 nights of this, and we've had, I said 1,000 was our goal of candidates. We have 3,026 candidates that actually are attending the fair. Of that 3,000, there have been 11,541 visits to booths, which means that each individual is probably going to about 161 booths, which could never happen in a real fair. And we could also see the conversations. The districts could either chat by just a little chat box, or they could do video conferencing. So if I'm talking to someone and I'm really interested in them and I really want to get to know them more, I could then really move it up to actually a video conference. But we can also see if they have applications out there, if those individuals are applying for jobs. And we have been amazed how many people are already applying for positions. This is, again, some of the IHEs that are there. They are doing some of the webinars about different themes as well. And that's an auditorium, and we have these chat rooms going on where not only are we talking to them, but they're talking to different districts. It's pretty amazing to sit in a room and actually watch it live as to how much is really going on. And we, I think, have hit 5 out of 7 continents. I actually had a Skype with a young man who went to Berkeley, I believe, grew up in Santa Barbara. I was telling Tina, is living in Japan and wants to come back for a teacher preparation program here. So we Skyped, and he's looking at several different programs that he might be interested in, and we are able to refer them right on the spot. This is the breakdown of the participants, which I think is really exciting. Of the folks that are there, you can see that there are several people with substitute teaching permits. What's really amazing is this kind of group in the purple. They all have preliminary or clear credentials. And that really surprised us, that we would have that many folks. If you look at the green, those are from out of state, people that have out of state credentials. And then there is different types of intern credentials out of the country. We have a group out of the country, and then those that are really interested actually in the teaching profession. So how did we get the word out? To get 3,000 people is pretty amazing. And I want to thank all our partners first, our satellite partners. Marquita, we can't thank enough because, I mean, she personally sent out to all the deans at her university and CC'd me on it. It was very helpful that she did that because we could see then all the folks that are getting the word out and follow up on that. But our Alliance Committee, everyone on our Alliance Committee actually was very helpful in sending things out. CSESA was just, had boundless energy in terms of really working with the different organizations. And, you know, we've been really working at, this is not about recruitment just in the HR office. We did a couple of different seminars at different conferences about everyone needs to be an ambassador. So that means the teacher in the classroom, that means the credential analyst. When we went to CCAC, we had a full house, and we also showed some of the credential analysts around the state that really do serve as ambassadors. They're the first introduction to really pulling people into the profession, and how we all need to be vigilant to try to do that in order to really encourage people to come into the profession. But we also used a lot of social media, as you can see, and we had a lot of outlets that we were talking about the fair, and our avatars had some voice in it as well. Here are some of the resources that we've been really working on. For this year, and where we're headed this coming year really now is we've really been successful in a grow your own program, and we feel there is a formula to it that now we are really beginning to develop materials to distribute to. We have some small districts that have actually field tested it, and it's have shown remarkable results as we had hoped it would be. And so we're now ready to start scaling it up and really making it more public of how do you grow your own, and how do you have your own fairs in your own local districts, whether you're urban, suburban, or rural. And our 10 tips are going to be very short things that those busy HR folks can take the time to read, and at least begin to understand that recruitment has to really be different than it's been, you know, over time. as I said, our Alliance Committee has really been a great ambassador to us. These are all the organizations that are represented on the Alliance. We feel that it's been so productive for the center, and we're really appreciative of all their help. The CalEd grants, you can see the administrator component versus the teacher component. And the breakdown actually between $6.5 million that went to the administrative component and then the $2.7 million that went for the teacher component. We have a summary on all of them, and we have tried to kind of group them thematically, and so they can participate. Then we will be starting to have alike groups that they can participate to learn from one another and kind of discuss some of the challenges that they're having. So as we look forward, we are really trying to amplify the things that we have started and our best practices. We've collaborated with Jim Brescia on that, as well as working on different how-tos of doing that. We really are in a scale-up mode in this next year, and particularly the virtual fairs that we're having now, that's been really successful. We plan to have 4 more in the spring, and judging from how successful it's been, we think that it will really be helpful to a lot of the districts and to the universities for participants to attend their program. So with that, I think I probably used my time.
Thank you, Donna. So now we're moving on to the 2 newest state-funded grant programs, the Local Solutions to the Shortage of Special Education Teachers and the Teacher Residency Grants. $50 million for competitive grants for the Local Solutions Grant Program was included in the 2018-19 state budget to support recruitment, preparation, and ongoing support of new special education teachers. This program provides up to $20,000 per participating teacher to implement locally identified solutions to address shortages of special education teachers. It offers flexibility to eligible LEAs to design and implement solutions that best fit the local context and need. This grant competition is currently ongoing. Applications were due on October 30, 2018, and the grant awards will be announced on December 14, 2018. Because this is currently an active grant competition, this is all the information that I can share with you at this point. Next, there are the Teacher Residency Grant programs. The first of these is the Teacher Residency Capacity Grants. This grant provides up to a maximum of $50,000 per grant to eligible LEAs to support a collaborative partnership between the LEA and an IHE that has a commission-approved teacher preparation program. And these funds are to develop the capacity for future implementation of a teacher residency program within the LEA for special education, STEM, and/or bilingual residents. Thus far, there have been 2 rounds of capacity grants, since there was sufficient funding left from the first round to offer a second opportunity. 13 capacity grants were awarded in round 1, and 9 capacity grants were awarded just last week for a second round. The first round grantees are listed on page 10 of the agenda item, and the second round grantees are indicated in the agenda item insert. Because of the timing of this competition, we didn't have the second round grantees available when the agenda item itself was published. Figures 2 and 3 indicate the residency areas planned by the rounds 1 and 2 capacity grant recipients. Grant award letters are currently in process of being sent to the applicants, and a total of $1,050,000, give or take, has been awarded for these teacher residency capacity grants. The next 2 grants are both currently in active competition, so I will tell you what I can about them at this point. The Teacher Residency Expansion Grant Program provides awards of up to $20,000 per resident participating in the program for the purpose of expanding a currently operating IHE-LEA Partnership Teacher Residency Program. The grant funding can be used to expand an existing teacher residency pathway in special education, STEM, and/or bilingual education in the applicant LEA, and it can be used to expand either the current program or to expand into an additional area amongst those areas of STEM, special education, and bilingual education. The RFP for these grants was posted on September 14th, 2018. Grant applications were due on November 15th, 2018, and the grant awards are due to be announced on December 14, 2018. Stay tuned. There's yet more. Last and certainly not least are the teacher residency grants. This grant program provides awards, again, of up to $20,000 per resident participating in the teacher residency program for the purpose of developing a new teacher residency pathway with an IHE that has a commission-approved teacher preparation program, and or the funds could be used to expand an existing LEA IHE partnership currently operating a commission-approved teacher residency pathway. The RFP for this grant was posted on October 15, 2018. Grant applications are due on January 15, 2019, and the grant awards are due to be announced on March 8, 2019. And now Iori will continue till the end of this item.
Well, this concludes our report, and staff recommends that the Commission approve the 2018 annual report on the classified program for transmittal to the Legislature. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will now open for public comment. And I have 3 comment cards. We're going to go in the order of Saret Kaminsky, Doug Gephardt, followed by Jacob Guthrie. So we'll start with Saret. If you can come up and state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Darling Hammond, Executive Director Sandy, and esteemed commissioners. My name is Saret Kaminsky, and I'm Policy Director of Educational Services at CSESA, which stands for California County Superintendents Educational Services Association, and we represent the 58 county superintendents. This is an important agenda item, and I'd like to thank the CTC staff for their thoughtful presentation on these grant opportunities. I'd also like to thank Donna Glassman-Summer and Marvin Lopez of California Center on Teaching Careers and EdJoin staff for their partnership and coordination in these efforts. The partnership CSESA has with the center has allowed seamless communication, which has enhanced outreach, providing a direct line to our county superintendents, steering committees, and districts. We also commend CTC staff for their efforts in getting the RFPs for new grant opportunities posted in a timely manner so that our colleagues in the field can start accessing the funds that were allocated in the past budget. Thank you. Now that some time has passed for the Classified School Employees Teacher Credentialing Program and the CalEd program, my colleagues in the field have been offering feedback to CSESA regarding the successes and opportunity challenges around both the programmatic aspects and the administrative aspects of these initiatives. CSESA is committed to the success of these programs, and we believe that some of these learnings might be used to inform the rollout of the Local Solutions Grant and the Residency Grant Awards. Our concern is making sure the field can access the funds and carry out robust, successful programs that subsequently benefit classrooms across California. I just wanted to let the commissioners know that I'll be reaching out to CTC staff on some of these learnings and providing more detailed feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Doug Gephardt. If you can state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Doug Gephardt, and I represent the Association of California School Administrators. And I wanted to share some information about the integrated credential program. It's not about the program itself. It's an outcome of people having completed the program. Because the additional credits, units, are embedded in the degree itself when you graduate in 4 years, you have both the units for the degree and you have additional units for the credential. Typically, it's done in a fifth year, and those fifth year units are credited on the salary schedule beyond the BA. However, it's been brought to our attention a little over a year ago that some candidates, when they go for employment, aren't getting credit on the salary schedule for all the additional units for the credential. AXA and the Chancellor's Office of CSU had a conversation about this topic, and we suggested that it would be helpful if the CSU system would identify those additional units, put them at the bottom of the transcript with a bold heading so that make it easier for the credential analyst to see that those are additional units. The Chancellor's Office is doing that now. They have a process that they use for doing that. What AXA has done is we've had conversations with our HR administrators, and we have also put this announcement in our EdCal bulletin that goes out to 14,000 administrators, so that to heighten the awareness of taking a closer look at these credentials. But I bring this to your attention so that a good idea to speed up the process for getting teachers into the classroom ended up having a side effect of some teachers not getting full credit for their hard work. So it doesn't require any commission action or comment, but I thought it would be important for the commission to know that there's this little percolation of issue out there that AXA is working with the Chancellor's Office, and we're communicating with CTA to see what we can do to minimize the impact on the graduates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Jacob Guthrie. If you can, please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon. First, Jacob Guthrie here representing the Los Angeles Unified School District. And we would like to thank the commissioners and commission staff for their hard work on the planning for and executing the state-funded grant programs. Just as an update, LA Unified has successfully been awarded a California Classified Employee Teacher Credentialing Program grant, and we currently have 45 active members, and we have 6 who have so far matriculated into full-time teaching positions. So we're already seeing the fruits of the hard work as a result of the grant. We are also very happy to see that in the updated questions and answers regarding the RFP for the teacher residency grant proposals, that the Commission will allow contributions from an IHE to be used as an in-kind match. This makes it much more feasible for our district to apply for the amount of funding that would help meet our local need in terms of the amount of residents that we would hope to hire in the coming years. And then finally, in working with the IHEs that we've partnered with on residencies in the past, we have learned that there was funding provided to coordinate all aspects of the residency program and to subsidize the expenses that IHEs incur in setting up infrastructure to offer a residency model. Without this funding allocated, we are attempting to think creatively about ways to replicate best practices, but are finding it challenging with a limit of $1,000 per resident in administrative costs. We're hopeful that these needs will be taken into account as these grants are funded and as we move forward in trying to work with our university partners to offer more residency programs in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I think those are all the comment cards that we have for right now. Do commissioners have any questions or comments?
I do have a comment. Sitting in an institution of higher education where we're working towards integrated programs, I wonder about this question of pay scale. Because if you're taking a class as an undergraduate and you're paying undergraduate tuition, do you also get to, for your credential courses, do you then also get to count them on the pay scale? I actually think it is pretty complicated. So I would encourage us to really look into that and in terms of potential solutions, because you can't exactly have it both ways, right? You can't take classes as an undergraduate, which reduces your time to degree and your cost to degree, but then want to count those classes on the pay scale as if they're undergraduate courses. It creates a real conflict. So I think that has to be really carefully considered.
Do any other commissioners have comments or questions? Yes. Sorry, Vice Chair.
I just wanted to comment on the classified to credential grant. I just think that's the best idea, and I hope that more money comes in for that. There's nothing like growing your own. Students that already trust their, whether it's custodial staff or other classified employees, and to see, usually those are the people who are the rock stars on campus anyway. You'll see them out at recess for elementary school, etc. To see those people transition to the classroom, I think is so powerful, and whatever support we can get, whatever funding that can come through to continue that program, to offer more grants, I think that would be just amazing. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Yes? Oh, okay, well, it's just fine. Chair Darling-Hammond.
Which is just to say thank you for all the good work that's going into this. It's almost overwhelming, the amount of activity that's going on, and we appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing the numbers adding up as we see how many folks are coming into the profession. So part of me wants to know, what's the total? I don't know if anybody knows that, but if not, maybe we can come back at another meeting and sort of say, if we put all this together, people coming through the classified, through the residencies and so on, it'd be great to know how it adds up.
I think it's close to 10,000.
Commissioner Barnes and then Zumont.
Is there a way to, and maybe I missed it in here, is there a way to know, is there any part of the state that really didn't get on board with this, or areas that aren't represented or put in applications? I'll just be in my area in Kings County. I'm just curious. And I'm in a rural area, and I don't ever see, and this is a thing in my county, but I'm just curious, is there any demographics to show? Is there a pocket anywhere in the Central Valley? Is there an area that you didn't get anybody applying, or that there just doesn't seem like they're responding to you, or even saying, hey, give us the video to show, or the TV ad? Because I'm just kind of curious. We have a new county superintendent, so I'm just kind of curious I'm just interested to know if there's areas up and down the state that, if it's just targeted.
Is your question for the center? Okay, because if Jonna would like to answer that first, I'm happy to follow her as well.
We really try not to target any specific area. Kings County is in our backyard, so they almost are kind of our elbow partners. And we always try, they're involved in a lot of our activities. However, I think, even in this fair, it was really interesting to see. We sent it out equitably for over a month. In most things, we do the same thing. We blanket the state, and we don't only just hit we leave it up to our regional partners to then use their own connections. But when we did the issue over the communications with the videos, that was actually through Pasco. So we're trying to use our high-level partners to really get to everyone. If you saw how big our staff was, you'll understand why. And the only way that we can be effective is by having good partners and good relationships with our partners that are willing to jump in when we do have an activity to really get it out to the constituents that they interact with the most. So we hope that we are hitting as much of the state as we possibly can by doing that.
And I just wanted to add, in terms of the rest of the grants, Perhaps it might be helpful to give you a quick overview of how we get the word out, because we certainly want to make sure that all parts of the state know about this and have an equal opportunity to apply for these opportunities. One of the things that we notice is that the county offices in general in the more rural areas will tend to organize some of the LEAs in their region as a consortium to help to cover this. So even though you may see a single applicant name on an awardee list, doesn't necessarily mean that the grant is just going to that one grantee. They may be the lead agency for a consortium, all of whose members may not be listed on that sheet to begin with. So there may be more coverage than would initially appear from the list. And then we also make sure that we not only list this on the announcements on our commission website, we put it out in the PSDE news, to which we hope that all of the interested parties subscribe. We also put it out as a special CTC news blast so that it goes out across the state. And then we do send it to organizations and ask for help in making sure that the word gets out. I can't honestly say that we've not received applications from any particular part of the state. It depends on the competition and what the level of resources are out there and level of interest in the particular competitions.
I just want to clarify, I wasn't concerned or questioned about your outreaching and your information. I was just curious if there were areas that weren't responding or just hadn't applied. So it wasn't, I think everything you guys are doing is wonderful. I was just curious if if you had noticed there were pockets that just weren't giving you any kind of feedback at all. That's all. Because I know you guys do an awesome job.
Commissioner Zuma?
My comment was just adding on to the comments about the classified program and and getting some feedback around the numbers and the totals, and just maybe when we do that, talk about, one of the purposes was addressing the teacher shortage areas for that program, at the classified specifically for math, science, and special education and bilingual education. And so it'd be really good to know if we know if we're starting to hit some of those targets as we get some more feedback on how things are going.
Okay. Do any other commissioners have questions or comments? No? Yes? No? No? Okay. Okay. Well, this is an information action item. Do I have a motion to approve the 2018 annual report to the Legislature on the California Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program for transmittal to the Legislature?
So moved.
Okay. So, motion from Commissioner Zumat and a second from Commissioner Hind. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Yay. Thank you, Ms. Glassman-Sommer, Ms. Osamwani, and Dr. Jacobson. So, yes, we will. Hold on. We have no additional items for today. I recess the Education Preparation Committee.
Adjourn the general session, and we will reconvene shortly for closed session and reconvene general session tomorrow morning at 8:30. See you then. Yay.